Administrator, Mr. McKinney. Once again, thank you, Leonard. I want to take a little time out to thank each and every one of you for coming out this afternoon. And I want to welcome you here. We're going to have a dynamic presentation today by Dr. Jeffries. And the Institute welcomes him. Welcome all of you. And weather may be a little inclement outdoors. Fire in here this afternoon. So one of the things that the Institute is dealing with right now, as you well know, we're dealing with the Belle Isle issue. It's something that's very important because this is another attempt by the current city administration downtown to take a freestanding public park and turn it into a commercial industry. We also are going to have on November the 6th over at Walker Williamson at 12 noon. That's on the Saturday. Saturdays from now, we're going to have a forum dealing with that issue. Starting at 12 o'clock, we're going to have elected officials on hand, get their views, and different things like that on the status of Parks and Recreation as it's going to 21st, so-called 21st century. One of the things that we have to always bear in mind is that we have to be steadfast in our work, and we can't lose focus on what we're doing in terms of turning back with keeping from the city being turned back what they call good old days. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is being able to form the issue and be able to form the argument, form the issue, and be able to articulate the argument. Because one of the things that we're faced against right now with city administration, one of the main reasons why the administration is in place now, because the news media form the issues and articulated the argument. The electronic and print media, that's why things are kind of going the way they are now. But I sense that change is coming, and we will be deterred in all that we do. And without any further ado, I'm going to bring up Dr. Art Carter. He's a very good friend of mine. He's the CEO of San Correa Marine High School here. Bring him up for a few remarks. Dr. Carter.
Thank you very much. It's certainly a pleasure for me to be here, and certainly a pleasure to welcome on behalf of the St. Correa family, students, faculty, and others, our good friend, Dr. LeonardJeffries. This is really the first major event we've had here at St. Correa. We're very, very new. We are a marine or a nautical-based high school. We're a charter school. We're chartered by Wayne County, Louisa. We opened on September the 8th of 1998, so we're in our second year. We have 9th and 10th graders here. Next year we'll add 11th grade, the year after that, 12th grade. But this kind of forum is exactly what we're trying to impart to our students. Not only obviously the algebra, the geometry, the marine science, the world history, but also some of the issues that our youngsters will be faced with in the 21st century. So we're very, very proud of the Public Policy Institute. Chris White, who is very, very active and a major force behind the Institute, is also the secretary of the board of directors for St. Croix. We are an independent charter school, not connected with the Detroit Public Schools, and therefore Chris White is a member of our board of education, and he is doing an excellent job. So we're trying to tie all of this together. I want to just introduce two people who are here from St. Croix. First of all, the most important person representing our student body, Ms. Artesia Seward, who is a 10th grade student who is here. Just like for her to stand and acknowledge. And I'd also like to introduce our Director of Communications and our senior instructor, Ms. Kathy Nolan. Oh, and really a person who is really important here, we decided to look into the German language, and we were very fortunate through Chris White to identify a world-renowned traveler, teacher, and scholar in German and French, and he is doing a fantastic job here for us, and that's Mr. Victor Hill, who is here. So I won't take any more time, but we certainly welcome you. We welcome you. We certainly, you know where we are, and our house here, which is your house, is open for any forums or events like this. We want St. Croix to be a part of the general fabric of this community. In closing, I just want to emphasize that we emphasize this to our students. St. Croix, of course, was an ancient university in the fabled but real city of Timbuktu. It started around the 13th century, and of course, as you know, it fell around 1507. But it was a world-renowned, world-class university where people came and studied from all over the world. When Europe was still in its dark ages, St. Croix flourished, where they conducted eye surgery, cataract surgery, and they had an excellent academy in medicine and literature and arts. And so we're trying with our students, based on that history, to impart the concept of excellence in education, that they're a part of something that goes back beyond slavery, before slavery. Education was important. It was an important part of what happened in Africa and for our ancestors who eventually ended up here on this side of the world. So I want to thank you once again, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our esteemed scholar and most of all friend, Dr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Next person we're going to bring up is our Deputy Director of the Institute for Public Policy and Educational Affairs. This young man, Mr. Greg Taylor, he is very instrumental in doing a lot of the things that we do at the Institute. And when he comes up, he's going to, when I bring him up, he's going to come up and explain to you the need for having, why the need is, the importance of having a think tank, a black think tank here in this city. Because throughout the country, there are very few, if any, black think tanks. And there's a very serious need and importance of having one, and for the community to support the think tank, a black think tank. And without any further, I will bring up Mr. Greg Taylor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Taylor. I'm Deputy Director of Institute for Public Policy and Educational Affairs, and I like to think about the information bringer. Right now, this is like, I wouldn't say it's a forum, but it is a forum, it's an educational forum. We've been doing presentations all across Detroit concerning the issue that affects Detroit. The issue of gun life. We've been on the west side, the east side, downtown. We've been all around the city of Detroit, bringing the information to those who may not be informed, who are misinformed. We've had council members come to our meetings. We've had House of Representatives come to our meetings, we had senators come to our meetings, we had all kinds of people come to our forum because they're interested in what some young black African Americans are doing. As my colleagues esteemed said, we are a Detroit-based black think tank. And I know it's kind of hard for some people to believe black men actually thinking and doing things. But that's what we're doing, and we're not going to stop what we're doing. We are at the forefront of this particular issue, but we're going to be at the forefront in the coming century of all the issues that affect the community and the citizens in Detroit, as well as the United States of Michigan, the United States, as well as far as we can go, as far as we can take this. We came to existence in like 1993, a bunch of us, me, Chris, Ryan, and a few other young men, we looked at the mayoral primary elections at that time, and we reached the conclusion that there was a need for a black think tank because at that particular time, the issues that were at stake in the city were not formed or based on the community or the grassroots leader of the community. We felt they were more or less prepared or put out there by the media or those that empowered to be, for lack of a better word. But it wasn't the issues of the community, put it like that. And so we felt that probably was the reason for such a very low voters turnout. And if you remember, back then there was very few voters at that time. Very, very few people were voting at that time because they were disillusioned with what was going on in the process, not just the voting process, but the issues in Detroit at that particular time. So we came together, and from then to 1999, we sat around, we talked, we didn't know what kind of group we wanted to start. We didn't know what kind of organization we were really ready to put out here. So we didn't want it to be just any kind of organization, because we could be any kind of organization. We wanted to be effective. We wanted to be informational. We wanted to be something different. But we wanted to be effective most of all. And I think that's why we became a black think tank. It's unique. It's not what you consider organization as opposed to some of these organizations that like to play on people's emotions. We want you to, when you leave a forum from one of our presentations, we want you to say, I didn't know that. These young men are on the ball. I didn't know that. And every time we do a presentation, when I get up here and I present my colleagues and we come with information, it's at least one person, maybe more, but it's one person at the end of that show or forum that's saying, I didn't know that. And that's what we try to leave them with. So it's been a pleasure for me personally to be able to come into the community, because I lived in Detroit all my life, was raised in Detroit, so I really like fighting the issues that affect the citizens here in Detroit. And as I was saying, right now we're fighting the bailout issue. Everybody knows it about money. It's about keeping a certain group of people and controlling who comes and goes on that island. It ain't about $3, because it'll be $5 in 2 years, it'll be $7 in about 5 more years, and it'll be $10 or $15 in about 20 years, and it'll be so far-fetched that we'll say, I want to go to the island, we might as well go to the point. And you can't say it's an island for recreation, because you're talking about putting four-star restaurants, complexes, all type of condominiums, IMAX theaters. See, people don't know this. People in the community don't know this. Oh, it's $3, that ain't nothing. It is something. It's bigger, deeper, and more political than just $3. That's what we've got to understand. Just like Councilwoman Mary Mahaffey told us this, just like the lottery and the education. Money's supposed to go from the lottery to Detroit Public Schools and all this kind of stuff. Never got there. And the same thing will happen with this $3 fee thing if we don't wake up and understand what's at stake. So, like I said, we'll be out November 6th. Joey Walker Williams Recreation Center. I think Virginia Park and 12. Virginia Park and 12. Rose Park. Rose Park. But it's a nice facility. I know that. We've been over there before, and they called us back. It's a very, very nice facility. Nice speaker system. I enjoyed myself over there, and I told him I would love to come back. So I hope that we can see you out there. But today, we have to actually bring in, it's just words that I can't even speak when I talk about Dr. Jeffries. I mean, this brother here, the brother called us one day. I got to tell the story. The brother called us, me and Chris, one day. He was going to St. Louis. The brother said, well, I've been in St. Louis. We said, we coming, Dr. J. And we got the car. We got in the car. Me and Chris rode to St. Louis. Had a good old time in St. Louis. Had a beautiful presentation in St. Louis. Dr. J stayed in the plushest hotel, bed and breakfast place. We got to do it before Dr. J, because we're going to check it out before Dr. J got there. We went East St. Louis. East St. Louis. Right across from St. Louis. Yes, East St. Louis, that's right. They treated Dr. J like a king. We went up in there, and we said, we're going to check this place out before Dr. J get here. We got there that Friday. We went to Dr. J's room. It was so plush. And so this is what you get when you're a scholar, huh? Hey. And me and Chris were in a hotel down the way somewhere. Budget deal somewhere. You know, but it was enjoyable because Dr. J threw down as usual, and it was very pleasant. It was very nice, and I enjoyed myself. So like I said, that's words I can't even describe when it comes to Dr. J. I love the brother. I love what he's doing, and in the spirit of what he's doing, that's why I'm out here on the forefront, and I'm going to continue to be so. And without further ado, I'm bringing up my brother, Brian Burwell, is going to give you some words on the director. He's the director of operations. Thank you very much for coming out. See you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I would like to first acknowledge Dr. Jeffries, our honored guest, Dr. Carter, principal here at San Correa, my executive director, Mr. White, Mr. Reed, and of course, Mr. Taylor, and all of our honored guests here this afternoon. Thank you for coming. As Mr. Taylor said, we all have a million stories to tell when it comes to our experiences with Dr. J. And I'd like to echo Mr. Taylor's comment, because when it comes to Dr. J, there really are no words. Because the brother's bouncing all over the Caribbean, Europe, Africa. You never know where he is. Several years ago, Dr. J said, I'm going to be in California. So myself, Chris, and a group of other students, we formed a delegation, and off we went, flying to LAX. And we met Dr. Jeffries in Los Angeles. And during that trip to Los Angeles, which, just like Ms. Taylor said, he stayed in the best hotels and everything. Yeah, we were poor. We didn't have any money. So, there's a group of 4 college students trying to do the right thing. So, during that adventure in Los Angeles, Dr. Jeffries sat myself, Chris, and some other people down, and he said, the key thing that's important in terms of you all is that you all are the people that are going to be the ones for whom the mantle is passed to carry this thing on. You're the young generation. It's your job to mobilize those in your generation and outside of your generation on both ends, those ahead of you and those among you, to make sure that this thing goes on in the right direction. And it's my job to teach you and show you which direction in which to take it, which he has done. And a part of that vision is the Institute for Public Policy and Educational Affairs. As my position in the Institute's Director of Operations, my job is simple. I just make sure everything runs right. However, it has been our goal and vision to make sure that the issues surrounding the Detroit community are shaped and formed by the people who live in this community and not by corporate interests and other people's interests. Because we want to make sure that what goes on in this city, done with your tax dollars, is what you want to do with those dollars. And we think that having an independent black think tank in this city is paramount to this city's survival and growth, because unless you have an institution from which to analyze your sociological issues and problems, then you don't know which direction in which to go. And that's another part of the purpose and the mission of the Institute for Public Policy and Educational Affairs, is to form the vision and goal based upon input from the community. Now, we have had a series of 9 forums as of yet, and they're still going. As you heard, on November the 6th, we'll be at Joseph Walker Williams Center. Out of these 9 forums, the consensus has been at each one of the forums, besides presenting the information, we take a poll of those who are there, and we say, after presenting the information that we present to you, do you think that this fee is what should be done? Are you in support of it? And the general consensus throughout these 9 forums is that the citizens in the community all around this city are not for this forum. And we have some blue cards over here on the table that we would invite each and every one of you here to take one and fill it out. And if you like, you can leave them here with any one of us, Mr. Taylor, myself, Mr. Reed, Mr. White, and we will mail them off to you to council to voice your concerns in opposing this fee process that has been instrumented as a plan for regional government. We have many handouts over here. Another thing that makes us unique and significant in terms of this Detroit community and other organizations in this community is that we are strictly research-based. We're a research-based group. We don't get up and make statements about things that we don't know about. When you hear it come from the Institute for Public Policy and Educational Affairs, be aware that we have the document. We did a presentation before the Coleman Alexander Young Democratic Club last week. And there were some officials there from city government who are the same officials that have been saying that we didn't have our facts straight. Every time they said we didn't have the facts straight, we show them the document from city government to show that we're not out here propagating something that we don't know about. We've done the research, and that's what's key. And that is a part of the educational process that was infused upon us, and the training that was infused on us by Dr. Jeffries. He said you can't just go out there. You got to be armed with the information and the knowledge to know what you're talking about, and get it laid out in a systematic process, which is a systems analysis process which Dr. Jeffries talked about. Now, I'm not going to prolong the time, and without further ado, as I said, I would like to invite each of you to get one of these blue cards over here on the table and fill it out, and you can leave it with us, and we will mail it off for you. Now, without further ado, I'd like to bring forth my executive director and a good friend of mine, my brother, Christopher White.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bush. Thank you, everyone at the Institute for Public Policy and Educational Affairs. I'd like to take the time to recognize a special person, a special friend who's been out there working the street, taking it to the city government, and he's one of the people who everybody should get to meet if they don't know. I'm talking about Malik Shabazz in the back. Leader of the New Garden movement. Been out there 8 years, and before the 8 years, he's been out there, and it's just a part of the bloodline, which is what it's all about. It's about that African bloodline. It's about that bloodline that kept us free, even though there was attempts to enslave us. That's what it's about. And most of those attempts have been financed, and they've been financed by the corporations, and it's happening again with our school system. And it's to stop us from moving forward on our own accord. It's to stop us from doing what we're doing at the Institute for Public Policy and Educational Affairs, forming the issues, coming up with the research, building the solution, bringing it back to the people, and moving forward as we move into the new millennium, ultimately serving God. And that's what this whole thing is about, this corporate control against the African-centered education. Dr. Jeffries comes from a long line, and that's that bloodline again of Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben. I was reading the other day, and I'm a fan and an admirer of Edward Wilmot Blyden, and I was going through his letters, and everyone talks about he was president of Liberia. Everybody talks about how he was African born and so forth, but one of the things that really struck me was it was in 1873. He was drugged down the street with a rope around his neck. The same thing that's going on in 1999 today. But he was drugged down the street for simply telling the truth. Another thing that really stuck with me upon reading these letters is that he was in constant contact with the Board of Trustees in New York. He was in constant contact with Board of Trustees in Boston. Once again, we had corporate interests controlling African-centered education. Any attempt toward African-centered education was vehemently opposed by those corporate entities that ran the Eastern Seaboard, as well as the slave trade and so forth. Same thing with Booker T. He had to deal with the corporate control. Every time we try to move forward, or we're moving forward, sure, we've had some problems with the school board, but the ultimate goal was for the corporations to take control of the people within this region so they can develop a workforce and stop the people from developing the philosophy of life to move their people forward, ultimately serving God. So what I'm saying to you is that this corporate control is somewhat anti-spiritual because it's designed to break the spirit of an individual, keep them enslaved, keep them ultimately doing the Creator's work, moving their people forward, passing it back to the young. So one of the things we're dealing with is this corporate control issue. You take a look at the so-called school reform, deform, or whatever you want to call it. The first thing they said was, we want to stop the board because the board is traveling too much. The first thing they did when they appointed the reform board was Archer said, first we must send them out to travel so they can see what goes on in other cities. But wait a minute, the board was traveling too much. Now we're going to send them out to travel to see other cities. The second thing they said was, we're spending too much money on principals and superintendents. Then they turn around and they buy out an intern while they're still paying off the last superintendent, and then they hire another superintendent, a CEO, they change the name, and pay him more who's an intern. And that's paying out three or four superintendents, but we're all of a sudden we're paying out too much of what we have. Now we're paying 2 or 3 that are no longer working. So we're sending people to heaven and they're not dying here. Okay, this is what we're doing. This is a part of corporate control of public school districts. They did it in Newark, they did it in Trenton, they did it in Cleveland, and they're attempting to do it here in the city of Detroit. Another thing they talk about, well, we're going to lock up parents. Dr. Adamati is a crisis manager, and the thing about crisis managers is when there isn't a crisis, they go out and they create one because they don't know a damn thing about management whatsoever anywhere. So what they do is they go out and create one. So they say, we're going to lock up parents. Who's paying for that? How much is that going to cost? How many jails are going to be filled up? That costs a lot of money to lock up parents. How do parents know if their kids going into the school? They can get them in there. But I know I skipped many a time. Nowadays, when I see people, they say, didn't you go to Central? I said, no, I just used to skip there. Didn't you go to Persian? No, I used to skip there. I went to every school except my own. Every now and then I found time to go to McKenzie. If it was homecoming, you saw me. You know, if it was Friday, you saw me. If it was the first basketball game, 50, 60, 100 of us were walking in. $1,000 coat, all the material things, $100 gym shoes. That didn't have a thing to do with my parents. They brought me up right. I chose to go the wrong way. Okay? So let's deal with that. Let's deal with that. Then he says we're going to fire principal. Okay? You fire principal, you bring in another one. First and foremost, interns, you fire principals, you bring in another one. Then you got to deal with the lawsuit for the wrongful termination. Who's paying for that? If I'm a principal and I'm a Mason and my judge friend is a Mason, I'm getting my injunction, I'm coming back. So now you got 2 principals fighting on the same office. Who's paying for that? We are. Now how are we going to have a corporate control and a reform and they're taking us backwards? If they want to set up whipping posts and things, they ought to just ask for permission. We're not going to give it to them, but we're not going to sit by the side and allow that to happen. So what we have is a solution for the sickness that's going down there. The prescription, the doctor is in the house. Dr. Jeffries. We would not have known about Kunta Kinte and so forth if the research was not conducted. Chief researcher of the Kinte Project was Dr. Jeffries. We had when you all had, I wasn't around, student revolt in the late 60s, early 70s, we would not have had the curriculum to put in there. We would have just been revolting and coming back doing the same thing if it wasn't for Dr. Jeffries. If it wasn't for Dr. Clark. If it wasn't for Dr. Ben. And he is carrying on what has been laid down by them and passing it to us. And we're sharing it. And the unborn are even feeling it because we are on the ball. And we don't plan on losing at all. We're going to win. We will not lose. We will win. It may be a rough century, but it's going to be a great millennium. We will not be here to see the victories, but we're going to be here to build them. And in fact, I don't know about you all, but I got plans on seeing some victories. Founding member of ASCAP brought the Nile back home to us, Dr. Jeffries.
That's right.
Brought the Nile back home to us. So Egypt is not over there by Alaska. The Nile is not the Mississippi.
It ain't the Middle East.
And it's not the Middle East. Middle East, or whatever you want to call it. But Dr. Jeffries has brought it to us. Always taught truth to power, and will continue to. How many scholars do you know when a book is written bad about them, they have an ad for American Express in the book? They have an ad for General Motors in the book. That's corporate control, trying to stop the truth from getting out to our people. Everyone has expressed their story about Dr. Jeffries, and I'm sure you've heard enough. Well, I have one. I remember on Saturday, October the 23rd, this is the story. Dr. Jeffries came to San Corre, and he laid it out. Dr. Carter was in the house. Minister Malik Shabazz was in the house. The Institute was in the house. All you were in the house. And Dr. Jeffries laid it out. He told the corporate structure, like Juvenile said, they got to back that thing up. It is not happening here. He told them that. Bling, bling, bling. He laid it out. I remember that story. We're all a part of that story. I bring to you the guy who has the $1 million white boy education, PhD Columbia, study at Lafayette College, pre-Ivy League, Masters at Columbia, PhD Columbia, study in Switzerland, study in France. But most important, $1 billion, black education, African education, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Chancellor Williams, John Jackson, you name it. You name it. Franz Presley, you name it. I bring to you the person to complete this story. I bring to you Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Leonard Jeffries.
Hotep brothers and sisters. It is certainly a pleasure for me to join the family in Detroit here and to participate in this process that's being set up at Sankaré Marine High School. And it's certainly very timely for me to come when the struggle is seriously being engaged in terms of how to deal with this enormous takeover that's taking place not only in Detroit, but on the planet. You're talking about corporate takeover everywhere. They use the code word market economy. But when you start to scrape away what that is, it's corporate takeover. And so it's important for us to understand what we're dealing with and struggle to the best of our ability against it in order to put in place that which we need. Frederick Douglass said, what? If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Now, you can't say it better than that. But of course, he went further and said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom, that deprecate agitation, are men who want the crops, and women who want the crops without plowing up the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, it may be a political one, but it must be a struggle. And he went on to say, power concedes nothing without a demand. Now that applies to us directly. Power concedes nothing without demand. If we intend to be operatives in the struggle for the development of African peoples, then we've got to make demands. We've got to organize powerfully and make demands on power. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, it never will. Very strong statement. Looking back, that's a heavy statement. It never did, meaning from the beginning of whenever, and it never will, and it ain't going to happen in the future. So Frederick Douglass, using his knowledge, laid down some serious statements for us to digest. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. So if Detroit accepts its oppression, it will continue. If African peoples in America accept their oppression, it will continue. African peoples on the globe accept their oppression, it will continue. So we are about a much larger question of developing a dynamic of struggle and resistance so that our oppression is destroyed. We have to be about the liberation, self-determination of African people. But unless we can make it real, it's not going to happen. And so we have a chance to come together today to sit down, commune with each other, and begin a serious process of looking at these issues. I'm glad I had the invitation. I've been to Detroit many times. And so whenever I do get a chance to leave New York, I take that opportunity. You don't know how it is to be in a situation where you got a couple of million people that are all pulling on your coattails for this and for that. And so whenever someone says, are you able to travel out of New York? I say, when, where, how? And so I'm glad to be in Detroit, and we had a little problem with the ticket. So there's several tickets that are now, at least 3, that are floating around. So this means that this is the first of a series of Dr. Jeffries coming to Detroit. And so we'll be coming back. The tickets have already been purchased. I didn't tell him I got a round-trip ticket already. So, but it's not the first time I've been a part of an important process here in Detroit. We were, several years ago, involved in the process in African-Centered education that the school board was working with. And there was a serious attempt to bring something to the curriculum. And before that, Detroit was one of the bases for our national organizations such as African Heritage Studies Association, the NCOBRA movement, the reparations movement, has had an important base here. And many of the people thinking about returning, repatriating to Africa, or at least building with the African continent, are found here in Detroit. So Detroit has a history of involvement in a serious way in the African struggle. But if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Now we can meet together, as we should, strategize and plan, because you have to do what our brother Kwame Ture has made a part of his life. Agitate, educate, organize. Agitate, agitate, agitate. And if we don't organize, we really can't deal with our circumstances. Individuals can struggle, but they're struggling against a system. and it takes a system to deal with the system. So ultimately, African peoples will not be successful in the endeavors that they're embarked upon, below these many centuries in dealing with the enslavement process that we were sucked into, unless we're prepared to put in place a system of African development. Everybody has that obligation and that responsibility. And unless we understand that's what we're up against, and unless we understand that's what our mission should be, to put together a system of our own development, we're not going to develop. Don't take my word for it. Unfortunately, my 2 suitcases were left at Newark Airport, so I don't have my image makers. Whenever I go anywhere, I carry my books, my ammunition, and I hold the books up. When I make a point, I always have a book in the hand. And the point that I want to make now is a reference to the book called Tribes. See, when Dr. Jeffries is trying to make his message clear to our people, take some notes. And one of the books that we should be studying collectively together in our study groups, in our institutes, and in our institutions like Sankore, is a book called Tribes. Now, normally we may think of tribes as some Indian, Native Americans running through the plains, or some Africans throwing some spears. But this is not the tribes we're talking about. This book was written by Joel, Joel, Kotkin, K-A-T-K-I-N. It's called Tribes, and it's subtitled How Race, Religion, and Identity Go to Make for Success in the Global World Economy. And what he attempts to do, it's a book published in '92, to show that groups that are going to be successful in this enormous economic enterprise called the world, race, religion, and identity go to make for success. Now that's counter to what we've been told that we should be all about. Individually, we have to achieve and make it as an individual. But in the reality, people make it as groups.
That's right.
And with structured entities of collectivity. And they told us to move away from that while they are moving headlong into it. And Joel Kotkin analyzes cold-bloodedly. And we need to look at it. And the first group that he analyzes in the 2nd chapter is called The Secret of the Jews. Now, many of us get nervous to mention the name Jews, like bacon and shake. Because that fear factor has been instilled out there to prevent you from having a systems analysis, and you get a paralysis of analysis. I'm not anti-anybody, but I'm telling you, you need to study everybody.
That's right.
And when you see Dr. J, I don't need your praises and accolades. I don't need to more people love me than a little bit. You need to study me. Study what has happened to me. Study what I'm trying to say. Cold-blooded analysis around what is the Jeffries phenomenon. So, when we look at the Jewish community, we need to study it. We don't need to have tears over the dead, the millions killed in the European Holocaust, white on white crime. We need to have a systems analysis of the Jewish world community. And what this Professor Kotkin, Joel Kotkin, who is Jewish, does is he titles that chapter, The Secret of the Jews. That they learn how to come together, particularly around economic issues, political and cultural issues, in order to survive the difficulties that they face. So we need to have that analysis as a part of our understanding. And then the second group that he points to are the British, the Anglo-Saxons, and we're, meaning Americans, are extensions of the Anglo-Saxons. And certainly over the last few hundred years, they have moved from the periphery of world development to center stage and domination and significant influence and control. Interesting, though, out of his analysis, he leaves out a group of people I just love to study. But nobody wants to study them. They've been romanticized, glamorized, but nobody wants to study them. And they were significant economically, globally, before the British. So when I talked to the professor, I talked to him, I said, why did you leave the Dutch out? Most of us think of the Dutch in terms of these wood shoe wearing, tulip growing, windmill pushing little sweet folks who saved their land from the sea. And we don't understand that they put together a system of economic politics and culture.
That's right.
Around corporate power, a la the Dutch style, that allowed them to move on center stage before the English and develop a world system that took a major control of the enslavement process of African peoples in the Atlantic and in Asia. We need to study that. It's amazing that a group like that can take tulips and make it into a multi-billion-dollar industry. But before tulips and chocolate were multi-billion-dollar industries for the Dutch, slavery was their main day. If we want to understand their involvement in the slave system, you have to see the enormous global struggle between Catholicism and what became a reform movement out of Catholicism, Protestantism, and you have to see the counter-revolution and the Protestant. You have to see a war between the Catholics and the Protestants in order to even understand the dynamics of the Dutch on the world scene. This is not part of the history. So I'm going to teach a little bit about that because they use their marine power to control world systems of economics and land masses. You know about a country that didn't have no land, that was retrieving it from the sea, but got control of major land masses. They got control of all the slave ports along the coast of Africa, from Goree through James Island, where Kunta Kinte came out of, Sierra Leone, Rhode Island, down to where it all started with the Portuguese in 1482, Elvina, all the way down to Angola, around the 14th of March. The Dutch had enormous control of the slave system at a crucial point. And as a result, Amsterdam became the leading entrepot for the world, handling the world's finances. And the control of this flow of money and whatnot was around corporate structures called trading companies. You know, we talk about the Dutch West Indian Company, the Dutch East Indian Company. Those were corporate entities that had political, economic, and cultural power, military power. They could set up states. We're never given a systems analysis when we look at these things. Everybody talks about the Dutch West Indian Company, but what was it? An enormous corporate entity that could move people, control land, set up government, put together money, financial packages. It established New York. New York comes down to the Dutch West Indian Company. It took control of Brazil from the Portuguese, the Dutch West Indian Company, and took over their enslaving operations, got control of sugar. And when they got kicked out of Brazil, that's in Southeast Tulip Grove, which you were women pushing this, they took operations and the corporate entity into the Caribbean and made it the cockpit for slavery around sugar. They brought sugar to the Caribbean. And when they tried to plant sugar on a little island called Curacao, and there was no possibility there because the ecology committed, it's just a sandbar. They made Curacao into the Amsterdam of the Caribbean, handling the slave operations, transfers of money, selling of Africans, insurance, all the rest of that. Curacao. And you all go down there for the little Caribbean retreat with your eyes closed and not looking at those beautiful homes that you see. Those were the homes of the robber barons, financial people controlling these entities. So you need to understand that a little better. You need a systems analysis. So the secret of the Jew, number one, their survival in the hands of the system of white supremacy. And then the secret, the role of the Dutch, number 2. And then the significance of the Anglo-Saxons, the British, and the Americans, number 3. And then we need to put in place their cousins, the Germans and the French, who wanted a piece of the action. And they fought hard to get a piece. So that's why we had the Berlin Conference in 1884-85. Because the Germans said, we want a piece of the action. And they had to set themselves up corporately. Eventually you had 2 world wars around the German desire for power in their system. But there are new boys on the block that we need to look at in terms of understanding the corporate power structure. It's going to apply to Detroit because you got to see yourself globally in a global structure, not just a community structure, but it's a global structure. And one of the solutions is community control in dealing with the global structure. New boys on the block, people that look a little bit like us, got some of a common history of having been oppressed like us. But there's a new honorary white. Asian. Japanese at the past. Honorary white. They proved themselves militarily in 1905. Beat the Russians. That set the stage for them being brought in as corporate partners. Eventually Hitler hooked up with them in World War II. By then they were raping Manchuria, China, etc. Japanese. In South Africa, other Asians are discriminated against, but the Japanese are what? Honorary white. In apartheid South Africa. Why? Because of the corporate powers that Japan brings to the table. And even America now has a strong partnership with Japan. When they call for the big 7 or the big 6 or the big 2 or 3, who's going to be there? Japan. But other Asians are coming up on the block. The overseas Indians are developing their corporate prowess. And the overseas Chinese. Many of our people have roots in the Caribbean, specifically in New York. They're glad to be in New York, found opportunities to take it away from themselves, and at the same time, the overseas Indian population is taking control of the Caribbean. A corporate takeover. Indian style. Now Trinidad. Economics, politics, and culture. Suriname. Economics, politics, and culture. Now, let's those 3 things because it is those 3 things that have to be working together for you to have power and develop system capabilities. And that's what I'm saying. We ultimately have to do. And you have to start with you and your family and your community to start putting together economics, politics, and culture. Suriname, Guyana, and Trinidad. The 3 richest parts of the Caribbean are under control of the overseas Indian countries. Indians who came as indentures, who were working the land after the Africans refused to work the land. And now they put together their what? Race, religion, and identity to develop some success for themselves. Our people are talking about Marcus Garvey from the Caribbean and from here, but not operating. Overseas Indians aren't doing it as individual entrepreneurs. They have a system. They have corporate entities. They're linked up with Mother India. Same thing with overseas Chinese. They're not individual entrepreneurs. They're individual entrepreneurs in the service of a system of Chinese and Indian power, organized around corporate entities. I had a taste of this when I went to Africa to live in 1965-66 with my wife to study the Ivory Coast because I was doing my PhD work there. And I lived in a house built by an African diplomat for family. He lived on the Second floor left, I lived on the second floor right. Chinese businessman lived under me, a French teacher lived under him. Chinese businessman was Leo Fong. Leo came to Africa without any knowledge of Africa, with limited knowledge of business. But he came because he was sent by a family corporate entity that sent their young men all around the world to establish a base in the different countries. Ghana, Nigeria, Singapore, Hong Kong. This is 1965-66. Leo came to offer to build anything that the Ivory Coast people want. You want to scrap steel plant, you want to this, you want to that. And while he was waiting to make an entree into the Ivory Coast, he put up a restaurant and wanted to call it Peking. I said, brother, you can't put Peking up in Ivory Coast because Ivory Coast was headed by Ufa's brother, the president, and he was not the most progressive person in his thinking. So he changed the name to Le Dragon, the dragon, instead of Peking. But the interesting point I'm trying to make is that this brother came representing a family corporate entity that had its tentacles around the world, and even though he didn't have expertise in any particular area, but he could be called upon to get the expertise, and since he was a member of the family, he could be trusted to maintain the process for the family. So wherever I go, here's this corporate process involved in hooking things up using race, religion, and identity. And we are not in the ballgame the way we should, because we're told that race shouldn't be a factor in what we do. Religion, we're so fractured on religion that we can't see the commonality of struggling and moving together in a godly way. And identity, we want to be American.
That's right.
Every day, every semester I go into my class of 60 young. Did it just a few weeks ago, beginning of the semester. Hotep, brothers and sisters. Now, I had to explain Hotep. Hotep is a Greek. Hotep. Get a little weak response back. Then I get into the class. How many Africans do we have in the class? 60 youngsters now. All looking like all of us in this room. You get 2 hands up. One year I didn't get any. The year before that, but another hand go up. But see, it don't take you long to get me some Africans. Within 20 minutes, I had me some Africans. Even a little Japanese fellow. And the little Miss Sweden. We had us some Africans. But I had to ask them, if we ain't got Africans in here, what we got? But Dr. Jeffries, I'm from Jamaica. Not Jamaica in the islands, Jamaica in Queens, New York, South Jamaica. I'm from the projects in the Bronx. I'm from Haiti. I'm from the Dominican Republic. Everybody identifying out of their Africanness. So there has been a systematic destruction of the identity process for us that would allow us to link up, and we have to restore that.
That's right.
There's been a systematic process of keeping us away from an economic foundation. We have to struggle to put that back in place. And the foundation of anything we do is economics and politics. Economics is your productive capability. This is the Albany speech that got people around the world upset. In the back of the speech, we have a diagram, which I use all the time, using the pyramid, saying we need a pyramid analysis. And one of the reasons why I use the pyramid is we need to reclaim our heritage. You can't go into the 21st century as African peoples AD if you don't appreciate the 21st century BC.
That's right.
And so we have to train our youngsters here at Sankore and around in Detroit and across the globe to be able to move in a timely fashion through the human experience. To be able to go back to the 21st century AD BC in order to prepare you for the 21st century AD. In the 21st century BC, we were experts in most of what it takes to build nations, empires, and kingdoms. We were experts in using the marine world. We knew how to float granite blocks down the Nile and put them up in monuments that have lasted for eternity, building for eternity. That was done the 21st century BC and before. Pyramid building goes back and the unification of the Nile, 3100 BC. There's no Europeans doing anything at that point.
That's right.
Very few Asians doing anything. There's no Greeks reading and writing, organizing, mobilizing, no Dutch, no German, no French. So we've got to be able to see the world when we were major players, putting together our corporate entities, because we organized our economics, our politics, our culture around a principal concept that I use, which I refer to as the 3 C's. Africans, as we build for the future, prepare to take control of our communities and make organizations and institutions such as Sankharé really work for us. The 3 C's have to be put into operational practice. African values at their core and are fundamentally spiritual and humanistic and can be described as the 3 C's: communal, cooperative, and collective spiritual development. Communal, you see yourself not as the go, but the we go. Communal, you see yourself not as just an individual, but you see yourselves as spiritual extensions of other ancestors that went before you, those with you extended out, your brothers and sisters, and the yet to be born, those spiritually who are to come. So the concept of individuality that the European narrows us down to is not our concept. It does not serve us well. We have to see ourselves as connected. I don't want to see myself outside of my brother, my blood brother, my biological brother. I don't want to see myself outside of my sociological brother, Professor James Moore. I don't want to see myself outside of my elders, my blood elders, and my sociological elders, the Dr. Clarksons, the Dr. Benn. I don't want to see myself outside of the spiritual elders, the Frederick Douglass, the Harriet Tubmans, that laid the foundation before me. I don't want to see myself out of the context of Africans yet to come. I do what I'm doing for the future, not for me. You have to see the we go, and not the ego. So we have to see the communal, cooperative, and collective value system and put that in place and make it part of our practice. Collective, communal, cooperative, and collective. Cooperative. African values are centered on working together. You didn't build the pyramid because you had some giant machines. The pyramid stand as the supreme example of collective building with a spiritual purpose. Has nothing to do with any slaves or ancient Hebrews building the pyramid. You need to put a timeline to that mess. That's why I have to go so hard on some of this ignorance. A simple timeline would put the thing correct. You can't build when you didn't exist when the building took place. If your patriarch is Abraham and he's 17 or 1800 BC, and the pyramids are already 1,000 years old, then how could you have built something that's been up 1,000 years before you existed? A simple timeline will put things correct. And nobody about to worry about the Greeks. The Greeks were the fathers of medicine. The Greeks were the fathers of history. The Greeks were the fathers of science. The Greeks were the fathers. And put a timeline. When did they become, and when was they doing this fathering? You know, 500 BC is the great Greek golden age, the age of Pericles, lasting 200 years, 500 to 300 BC. Africa has already faded through 4 or 5 golden ages, some of them lasting 1,000 years before there was a Greek golden age. Pyramids built 2,000 years before Greeks had writing systems, philosophical systems, statecraft, economics, cities of 100 gates, the city of thieves, Mossack. How do we we get to the situation where the Greeks, ancient Greeks, worshiped us and made us into gods like Imhotep?
That's right.
And now we are worshiping the Greeks and don't know anything about the Africans. Well, that happens somewhere. Race, religion, and identity go to make for success in the global economy, but we have a formula that makes for failure.
Yeah.
Confusion, ignorance, lack of understanding, afraid to search out the truth and make it real. That's why my life is to stand up so y'all can get unafraid. The truth will set you free. Communal cooperative. And so the context of working together. Africans still in their modest, small, simple communities today have that principle of cooperation. An African does not sit in his house and watch the neighbor next door building a house. The African would help him build a house, and when he had to build a house for his son, that neighbor would help him build a house.
Yes. Yes.
That's the context of African corporate structure that we need to develop, coming from our community power, to deal with this global monetary corporate structure that we face. Communal cooperative and collective. Africans share what they have together. You and I are here not because we have an individualized process at work for us, but we shared what we had. That pot on that stove in my aunt's house, with the string beans and the potatoes, and that cornbread in that oven, I knew what was going for her children. It was for me and my brother. And if we brought in some friends from the neighborhood, it was for them. We grew up with a sharing and a caring, but we lost it. We had it when we moved into Detroit, but it didn't take us long over the last 30 or 40 years to be thinking we should be out in Bloomfield somewhere. They didn't want us in Deer Point, but we wanted to get out to Deer Point. Or whatever it's called, it's Dearborn. Dearborn.
Same thing.
All over the country they built the Dearborn. They call them Levittown. White folks escaping out of the cities into these white communities. And the only reason why they wanted to go there was because we wasn't there. Prestige and power in white America is where black folks are not. So they moved from decent housing in Detroit to go out to some matchboxes out in the suburbs because they didn't have to deal with black people. And all over the urban communities of America that has happened. So what I'm trying to say is, as we look at and analyze this situation, we need to have this perspective that the brother Joel Kotkin put in place, that race, religion, and identity go to make for success in the New World economy. He's talking about the global economy that was developed over the last 500 years that comes out of the enslavement process. Commercialism, mercantilism, capitalism, European nationalism, Protestant Reformation, all of that comes out of the enslavement process. In my course outline, I have some copies of it here. We talk about a turning point of history, 1482 to 1536. 1482, when the Portuguese coming down the coast of Africa established the fort dungeon Elmina in what became the Gold Coast. And so the first enslavement of Africans gets an institutionalized structure around the Portuguese. And over the next 50 years, historical events take place, which I call accidents of history, which allow the European, who before this time, 1400 BC, was land poor, resource poor, and people poor. I use these descriptive terms in order for us to see history. Land poor. Most of the land in Europe was not available for economic development. It was under control of feudalism. People poor. The bubonic plague. They call it the white plague. I mean, they call it the black plague. I call it the white plague. The bubonic plague had wiped out half the European population in many areas. They couldn't even maintain their health citizens in the 1400s. So they were people poor. And resource poor because Europe is not a place where you have the enormous resources that other parts of the world have, particularly Africa. But within 50 years, Europeans that were land poor, resource poor, and people poor became land rich, resource rich, and people rich by accidents of history. One of them, the Portuguese, sailing down the coast of Africa, trying to find a home, trying to link up with some Africans that they could. They were looking for Prester John, the Ethiopian Christian king, to hook up with him in their fight against Islam. Islam controlled the Mediterranean world for 700-800 years, from 711 AD to 1500 AD. The Mediterranean was an Islamic lake or sea. And so the Europeans couldn't go to Asia through the Mediterranean. They had to go around it. So they were seeking to find that going around by going around Africa. And they would just float down the coast and hope to bump into something. And eventually they bumped into different African groups that came down to the coast to greet them with their gold. And so the Europeans decided, we're going to put a base here for mercantilism, for trade, for gold. Black gold in African bodies and gold in African resources. So 1482 is very important. That permanent base built along the coast of Africa in Ghana. And it was replicated by many, many dozens of forts. In Ghana alone, there were 40 or 50 or 60 of them. But these type of forts were developed in Gorée and Dahomey and in Nigeria and Angola, all the way around to Fort Jesus in Mombasa, Kenya. So you need to see a system, and that's what I'm trying to outline. The roots of the European system were laid in this period. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered, no, he didn't discover nothing. He was discovered on the beach, and the poor Native Americans didn't know what was about to come on them. If they had a systems analysis, they would have probably taken care of him, and they wouldn't have had the difficulties that they had. Because, see, a systems analysis might have let them know that he had a contract. He was thinking corporate entity, corporate power. He had a contract to control any lands he discovered. He was going to be the viceroy of those lands. And any seas he crossed, he was going to be the admiral of those seas. That was built into his contract. And he was to deliver gold back to Spain so the Spanish monarchs can start up the Crusades again. These are written documents. Europeans had contracts. And the poor Native Americans were destroyed because of this European greed. And what I'm trying to say is that the base of corporate power is greed. Profit by any means necessary. And the world cannot be run around that principle. And so corporate control cannot happen. It has to be fought. Community control is what is required.
That's right.
You have to control your community. That means you control your economics, you control your politics, and you control your culture. Those are the three things of systems capabilities that I always talk about. First principle in the universe is economics. Everything that lives in this universe has to have a creative, productive dimension. If it doesn't have it, it will die. The minute cell of your body has to be economically productive and creative, otherwise it dies. The collectivity of cells that become your various organs in your body are corporate entities, systems of development that have to have economic and productive capability, otherwise they die. And if these organs that make up you don't function properly and are not functioning economically and productively, you die. So that's a basic principle of the universe. A community dies if it does not have control over its economics and its productive capability. So the European says to us, you work hard. In fact, we brought you out of Africa to work. We had jobs here for you. But don't worry about moving into the larger economic realm. Controlling finance, putting together large sums of money to develop a banking structure, or even credit unions, hooking up our cities where we're strategically located. And can you imagine a black league of cities that hooks up the finances of the cities to do for the cities? But our people don't think that way. We get control of the city and it's really not control. We're just there at the front
That's right.
for the larger entities, the corporate entities. So I'm trying to say that as we move into the 21st century, we've got to have this understanding. Even going back to the 21st century BC, but certainly understanding this last 500 years. Economics, first principle, your productive capability. People say, Dr. J, you're looking pretty good these days. You lost some weight. What happened? You're not suffering from AIDS or anything like that. I said, no, bro. But I got control of the economics of my body, starting with the cell. I'm in a system that analyzes the cell. Cell analysis. I never thought about that before. I'm the one who talked about system analysis and never thought that you need to start with the cell of your body. If you understand what's wrong with you, take one drop of your blood and look at the cells of your body, and you will have clearly what is happening to you. And if the cell of that body is more than 10% acid, you are setting yourself up for all sorts of diseases. Your body should be 90% alkaline. So there has to be a balance of 90 to 10% between acidity and alkalinity. We need to teach that. We need to teach that at Sankore, that the system of the body needs to be balanced, and the other systems need to be balanced. Water is an important part of human development, just as an important part. The human body's biological development, just as an important part of the ecological development of the planet. We need that type of science. I try to tell my students, garbage in means what? Garbage out. And that applies to your body. It applies to your mind. Garbage in, garbage out. You can't have no high thoughts, no serious thoughts. When you haven't put any thoughts in that would help you process it to pull some thoughts out, that music problem we got. Culturally, we created music to raise us to higher spiritual levels. And now we have a music dynamic that takes us down to the lower level.
That's right.
As they say, the lower chakra.
Yeah.
And so, I was just listening to a tape when I was in the parking lot today coming here about a temptation. I mean, it's, my wife said, that's serious music.
Yeah.
You know, that's the music to get your thing together. You see? You know, we got all of this stuff, you can't understand what they're saying. It's a beat. Got you throbbing and bobbing, and you don't know where you're going. And it's not by accident, it's by design. Other people know what music can do, and so they have a system. We develop music as a spiritual process. So we've got to understand some of our originality in terms of these processes. So economics becomes the first principle, but the people who control these corporate entities and want to get control even greater of our lives say, look, black folks, don't worry about organizing economically. You just work hard, we give you a paycheck, and then we'll let you spend it. We let you spend it till you drop. Don't even worry about saving it. That's too much for you to be remembering how much the interest is in the savings account. Just spend it. You know, your life expectancy ain't too long anyway. Don't even worry about that. Spend it. So we're the biggest spenders on the continent, on the globe. We produce $500 billion, and it's gone before it gets into our pocket. Because you got to pay the credit card. You got to pay this and that. So you're going to extend yourself and borrow beyond your means. I had to get a big car because your neighbor had to get a big car. I had to get a couple of fur coats, you know, for the men now. I'm not even talking about for the women. You had to get those fur coats for the men. You know, we're into this consumer thing. We don't put the money cumulatively together in a cooperative faction to create these corporate entities for ourselves. I'm not talking about the global corporate entities for our destruction. I'm talking about corporate entities for African development. And so that's where we really need to go. And you can't do it unless you have, like the brothers put together the study group. You need to get some sisters in there too. Go ahead, you know, the institute. You can't have nothing unless you have a balance between the male and the female principle. That becomes offensive. I'm just telling you. I don't even know whether you got sisters or not. You may have, but I'm just telling you. You have to have that balance. It's the European who thinks he can go through life with structures of men loving men. Hey! That's the Greek. Men loving men. And they passed it on to the Romans. Men loving men. And then it went from the Romans into the Holy Roman Catholic Church. Men loving men. And then it went from the Holy Roman Catholic Church into the Protestants. Men loving men. And then the Protestants passed it on to the English and the Dutch and the Germans. Men loving men. Then they crossed the Atlantic Ocean into America. Men loving men. And then Negroes adopted it too. Men loving men. I'm a black Greek. Hey, we need to look at some of these things and make some adjustments now. The African concept is the harmony and balance between the male and the female principle, and that's how we know the ancient culture of the Nile was ours, because the female role is so central. There's no other cultures, Asian, particularly Northern Asian, European, that have the central role of the female like we have it in the Nile Valley. So you don't have to play a color game in the Nile. It's a value system game. But what I'm trying to say is, economically, we're told, don't even worry about it. You don't even have to open up a mom and pop store. We got some Arabs sitting in the desert. Some Bedouins. That's just waiting. They know they can't deal with the family of swords that has all that oil money. But the dream in the desert is not to remove the family of swords and come to get the oil money, but to come to America and set up a chicken joint in the black community.
My Lord.
Arabs selling us chicken.
Or barbecue.
And selling us barbecue. Or going to these stores and all you see is debt. Salt, potato chips,
Alcohol.
salt, sugar water. I mean, you could do a study of what's in these stores. It's dead. And I've been trying to tell you all to stay away from whiteness. Things white, that's a good rule of thumb. You know, you'll live long on the planet if you follow one rule of thumb. Stay away from things white. White bread. White man took some healthy wheat, bleached it, enriched it, and said he put some vitamins and stuff in it. You can't trust that white boy to put nothing back into nothing. Why did you bleach it in the first place? Because aesthetically he wanted something white. Took the life out of the wheat, and then he says on the cover of the wheat, of the loaf, that he put enriched it. You can't trust him with no. Look, the blacker the bread, the better the bread. Back at the school cafeteria, I didn't even got the white man telling us, make sure Dr. Jeffries has his black bread. Sister brought me 4 black rolls yesterday. Some of my people look at me, you gonna eat 4 black rolls? No, I'm gonna eat 2 here, I'm gonna take the rest of them, take them home. Black bread, black rice, flour, and the rest. Stay away from that white sugar, processed death. I can't handle milk now. I grew up on ice cream, but the 2 or 3 times I got sick over the last 5 years, I trace it back to Haagen-Dazs. The richest of the white products that they produce. It's too much mucus produced. You have to be aware of the mucus and yeast, fungus, and mold in your blood. That's how you create this healthy cell thing internally that I'm talking about. So the rule of thumb is stay away from things white. White flour, white sugar, white milk. And the white girl. You know, that's what they say on the street, is cocaine with the white girl. You know, and then you can extend that white girl to ice people. I mean, white people. I threw the ice out there because I had to get that, and everybody around me, that Jeffries, he's so terrible, talking about ice people and sun people. Who is he to be talking, dividing the world up? Now, they have their paradigm or their division. The first world is them, They didn't even let us crawl into the second world. They dumped us down into the third world. We don't even ask, well, what is the second world? We're just comfortable in the third world, making them the first world. Well, in the knowledge that we have, that all that has been reversed. The truth has been revealed, and there is one world. It's the African world. It's the first world. Everything else is an offspring of our African genes. And so we don't even count them as worlds. They just following us. That's all. And you put the Asians in there too. Dr. Jeffries said, you too rough. You mean everybody comes from African genes? Unfortunately, yes. That's what science and history says. It ain't me. Yes. But why do you call the Europeans ice people? Because that's how he emerged. That's the genesis of the European. Ain't no Garden of Eden. Well, you question the Garden of Eden? Well, when's the last time you talked to a snake? And have you figured out Noah's Ark? I mean, he had, what, 2 by 2? 2 little centipedes, 2 little cockroaches, 2 gorillas, 2 giraffes, 2 elephants. And then he was looking up under them to make sure he got the right mix. No. Look, you're talking about parables, you're talking about metaphors. You know, don't get caught up in that, but you have some of our people ready to kill us. Are you saying that every word of the Bible is not right? Yes. And which Bible are you talking about? The Bible was written over a 2,000-year period. Which one did you know? You're talking about the Mormon Bible that was written yesterday? You're talking about the King James Version that was written 400 years ago? And they call it a version. Most of us got a version. And then let's not deal with that virgin. V-I-R-G-I-N. Mary. You know, they had this big to-do in New York. The man there is upset because somebody threw some shit on the virgin. Put some shit in the bin. You have to clean this tape up. But that wasn't a problem. The problem was that the virgin was black. Yeah. That's right. Big lips protruding out her mouth, nose spread all across the canvas. Black. The virgin was black. Yeah. Now, none of us had sense enough to say, well, the artist was actually restoring some of the truth of the virgins, because the most sacred virgins in the Madonna and the Child in the Catholic tradition are the black Madonna and the Child. The Pope himself prays daily to the black Madonna Czestochowa, the patron saint of Poland. But nobody wants to raise those issues. You know, the fear factor. But I'm saying we need to have a change in food, thinking, social structure is a part of the change. So take the Jeffries pyramidal formula and make it work. Economics, first principle, politics, second principle. But to keep the economics and the politics together, which is the foundation of anything we do, an institute here or the Sankharey School has to have an economic and political foundation. Economics is your productive capability, politics is your management capability. Politics is not what politicians do, even Coleman Young. Politics is what you do, what your family does, what your community does. And one thing you should do is control your schools. That's your God-given responsibility and right to control the education of your young. Make your teachers and administrators accountable. Yes, sir. We've been told to stay away from schools and they'll take care of business and you just take care of the homework. Something's wrong with that. Yes, sir. Again, they're marginalizing us and we're not allowing Frederick Douglass to speak to us. Power concedes nothing without his command. It never did, it never will. Politics is your management capability. Economics is your productive capability. And on that foundation, you can maintain a proper economics and a meaningful politics if you have, at the summit of the pyramid, culture. Culture is the values. Culture is the mind. One of the great members of our community He was killed a few years ago. Steve Biko.
Yeah.
I did a book on South Africa. This is the major article in that book. And I always use Steve Biko because he was the Malcolm X of his time. And in this book I cite some powerful words and analysis that he gave us. And it goes like this: the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So if we have a school system controlled by people who do not intend to give us our due, we are putting our most valuable possessions and resources in the hands of the oppressor. And so we have to look at that. And even if we have white teachers, we have to make sure that they are in a controlled process, that we know what's happening, that they're using their skills to transmit the learning, and they're not transmitting their values. And then we have to put an African test to Negroes. That's where we have a problem. We have a whole host of Negroes running around the world who are in the service of the system of white supremacy. And unless we can put an analysis to who and what they are, it's most of the mayors. Because they're the product not of our system, because we haven't put it in place. We've only got fragments here and there. They are the products of the system that enslaved us, that colonized us, that's victimizing us, that's controlling our world even greater now with high technology. And so we have to plan and dream about putting in place an African system, putting the economic, politics, and culture of African development in place. You can take the flip side of what Steve Biko says and turn it upside right, and you have the most potent weapon in the hands of the liberator is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the liberator in dealing with your young is the mind of those youth. And so the larger community now dealing with high tech is bombarding their youth with garbage. Garbage music, garbage images, garbage knowledge, garbage confusion. And we raised the question of the Nile Valley being African. And it's so clear with the scientific evidence, and having visited the Nile many times, and we took 1,000 people when we formed ASCAC in 1987. So we had 1,000 people of all our generations. I had 3 generations of Jeffries in, seeing the reality of the Nile. But still, Europeans won't give it up. They still want to maintain that the people in the Nile, although they were black and brown, they really weren't African. They were black and brown white people. And they still want to maintain this tale about the oppression of the pharaohs and the suppression of the so-called European Jews. And so, in spite of all that we put forth with Dr. Ben's work and Dr. Diaz and all the rest, they just hesitate to bring back on us the Prince of Egypt. Denigrating Ramses, who was a Prince of Egypt, the son of Setai I, one of the greatest rulers in the history of the world, both of them, and they gave us myths and legends around Moses, who may have been raised in the royal house, but he wasn't a prince. And if he was raised in the royal house, he was raised around the Kemetic principles of the 42 African commandments, the system of Ma'at. And so if he went up to the mount and spoke to the Lord, he didn't go up empty-handed, empty-hearted, or empty-headed. He went up with the principles instilled in him in the great lodge of Waset, if he was raised as a prince. But they don't want you to deal with this. The denigration and defamation of Egypt, the Nile, Pharaonic culture is still going on. They had Cleopatra as a whore, sleeping around for the Romans and the Greeks. They had something called Star Gate.
Right. Yeah.
And you should see the direct attack on the Nile and black folk. So they are not hesitating. And since you have been quiet about it, leaving me out there by myself raising hell about it,
Go ahead.
you got what you deserve. They threw Tarzan on your butt. Tarzan. Disney, Tarzan. They cleaned him up. And then to let you all know they are really serious, they took the ultimate genius in the human experience. And I don't want to raise him too high because I'm sure there were some sisters that were as strong as him. But Imhotep, and they took an old 1930 story, an old movie, and redid it again.
The Mummy.
The Mummy, which denigrates the super mind that we are raising up and made him into a horror figure. I'm saying the attack is coming, but why is it coming? Because we're on a victorious path. We don't even know it. The fact that we can come here and have our workshop here and trying to get ourselves prepared. And this is workshop number 1. I'll probably get 3 over the next several months. I told the brother, you have to oppose yourself on these youngsters. They can, Dr. J is supposed to fly in for a quickie and then fly out. No, it's a sustained process. I got to keep my eye on you, just like I got to keep my eye on them. And make sure you all meet those standards that you're talking about. That's right. I'm coming back. And the institution here is very important. I'm sorry the doctor left before I could tell him how important it is for him to stay on the case. It's rough to try to put something together. But I was here and walked through this building when there was nothing here. It was just planned. And they were talking about knocking this down and putting this here, but they've been able to do it. Let's give them an acknowledgement, even though he's not here. But he can't keep it together unless that economics, politics, and culture, that pyramid of power, is put in place. And as he works with that pyramid of power and puts a curriculum that's meaningful, the technical skills around marine technology is important. But that's not going to produce the African minds that we want. I'd be afraid to give some of your skills and technological understanding because you ain't got the mind and the heart to do right by it.
That's right.
The African understood this, so in his pyramidal system of knowledge, you had, at one polarity, the most important function, which is the socializing function. That produced character. And that starts before you're born, that the system is put in place to help you develop character by your society. And it just continues through the various levels of schooling, formal and informal, socialization. And at the opposite polarity is what we can call the tooling function, to go with the socializing function. And the tooling function is putting the skills in your hands. But you don't want to put skills in the hands of someone who ain't got his character together, necessarily. Our people understood that. That's why they put the ultimate of your achievement on the planet was to have your heart weighed against the feather of truth as to whether you live like God. This was the standard. Whether you live like God. Not as whether you live like a dog and a devil and a beast and did everything wrong, and then on your deathbed you took Jesus and you got into the, you were saved. You lived like God. You sought perfectibility. Your heart was going to be weighed against the feather of truth. And this was the standard for everybody, from the king and the queen, Pharaoh on down. And so even those things that are not human had to seek a perfectibility, like the scarab beetle had to fulfill its function of representing the cycles of development. The hawk had to fulfill its function of soaring into the heavens. So the Africans used the different creatures that are part of God's plan and gave it a certain place. We have to understand what our people did. We have this materialistic culture that measures us by what we wear, what we drive, and where we live. And that's not godly. That's not godly. If anything, that's the work of the devil. Because most of these things have been obtained by exploitation.
That's right.
Yes.
Unfairly of the environment, plus the human family. Those people that are super rich are not super rich because of some genius. The only one I think who achieved that is this one who's 50 billion, 67. Every weekend he goes, he's some luck and some genius. He makes everybody look foolish, you know. And and they need to take him down too. Ain't nobody supposed to have no $70 billion. They need to look. How come they found some scandal? They found something on Clinton every day. They pull something out of the closet on Clinton. This Bill Gates must have. Ain't nobody supposed to control $70 billion. But they allowed it to happen because that's the system that they have. And when he goes to have his heart weighed against the feather of truth, people will say, well, man, with all that wealth that you had, you could have resurrected the African continent.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? $70 billion a year. And that's not $70 billion that's a one-shot deal. That's floating in every year. So I'm saying we need to look at and analyze these things, but I'm saying we're on a victorious path. I don't want you to go away depressed. That's why they're putting up all those movies against us. Because they know we've opened up the Nile and we can't go back into the Negro box. Once you become African, it's hard for you to be sucked out of it. Of course, the society's going to work at it. But it's going to be hard. Even Skip Gates is stealing the African pin. Look, the fool is going to keep on messing around until one day he's going to declare himself Dr. Jeffries' brother. You can't go into all the holy African places that he is gone into and not have something capture you after a while. His latest thing, and it's going to be shown in New York this week, is his 7 Wonders of the World. Where he took a year off, had this idea he wanted to uphold, raise African wonders. Now, where did he get this from? And so he traveled through the Nile. And he is in the Abu Simbel. And he's going to have a sequence on that. And then he traveled into Ethiopia. And they have him climbing up the mountains into the sanctuary of the holy of the Coptic religion. They have him going into southern Africa, into Zimbabwe. Then they have him going to Timbuktu and declaring that the 50,000 books that they found they're going to take back to America. But the question is, take back to America where? To whom? Controlled by whom? See, it's going to be controlled by Harvard, and that means his own people are going to control it. And we don't know what the interpretation of it is going to be. But he's going everywhere. The only place he didn't go was Nigeria because of the wars and whatnot, the killing. And he's close to Wole Soyinka, who was his teacher in Europe when he was at Oxford. So he said he didn't go to Nigeria. He went to Mopti and to Jenny and the great Sankore. So all of this greatness of Africa, he's been fooling with. And I'll tell you one thing, the African Holy Ghost gonna grab his got it. African Holy Ghost will grab his head. You don't play with all of that he's playing with and come out a Negro. But see, the problem is he done tasted so much whiteness that he's diseased. And he's gonna need some more treatment, some more trips to Africa. Some more Holy Ghost treatment. And he got a white wife, and so the disease process. And he's dealing with those 2 daughters because they don't know whether they're white or black. And he uses them as the model for identity in his book. And it's unfair. But it's unfair because you can't take our great history, our journey, our struggle, and then wrap it around the confusion that your daughters have because you married across the line. And that's what he's doing. Brilliantly, because he's a good writer. He says, first line of his book, that I'm not a historian. Well, why the hell are you there? And why did you bring some of us who devoted our lives to this?
Yeah, right.
But African Holy Ghost got plans. African Holy Ghost got plans for it. So I said we're on a victorious path. So let me see what I was trying to nail down for you was that there's an enormous struggle for power on the planet. Detroit is a microcosm. And then when we have the pyramid analysis that we use, we have the pyramids linked up, economics, politics, and culture. And we have an inner circle representing internal analysis in relationship to the outer circle, that you always have to think internal and external analysis. You always have to think macro analysis and micro analysis. When I went into this health thing, and last year at a health retreat in the Cottonwood Health Spot at my family home down there in Georgia, I said I was going into a cleansing fast. And so within 30 days or so, I lost 30 pounds or more. Try to keep it off. But it was an internal analysis of the cell that allowed me to deal with the external analysis. So you had a micro-analysis that allowed me to impact on the macro-analysis of my system. And so I didn't have any disease going in. Because you were tested before. I don't have high blood pressure. I don't have sugar. I don't have this. I don't have that. And all the people around me have it, and they're dying. So I said, I better be checked out, because why am I immune? Okay? But with the new system I have, even if I did have something, it would counteract. Because you have to have alkalinity in the blood in order for a diseased body to heal itself. Because a lot of the medicines we have after effects or side effects that are worse than what they're trying to cure. So the cell of the body will give you a more systems understanding of what's happening in you. And this was rough because I had to have 13 glasses of water to flush the systems out. Okay? And I try to maintain a lot of water, but that means I always got to leave, where's the men's room? Before I came to this mic, I asked them, where's the men's room? Got to the airport, had to go to the men's room, So you keep the system flushed, though. But it's better to do that than some people, I can't drink no water. You're going to die. You're going to develop some serious disease. So what we're trying to say is, we're moving on a victorious path, but we have to put a microanalysis and a macroanalysis together. Microanalysis means we have to develop our individual cells as well as our individual cells, S-E-L-L, as well as our individual cells, S-E-L-S-S, and then our extended cells, meaning our families. And you hook those families up into strategic units, corporate units, African corporate units, to develop your community. And Sankara is an African corporate unit. So we're not talking about destroying corporate power, we're talking about structuring corporate power to be African for self-development. You need corporate entities. I said you need a system to deal with a system. If you don't have a system, you're not going to be able to deal with the systems that are arrayed against you. And so our family structures have to be redeveloped. And they have to be redeveloped around African values. When you go to the top of the pyramid and you want to analyze what's happening to you and around you and an issue, you raise the question of the capstone: concepts, analysis, processes, and systems. I tell my students, don't look at things singularly. The pyramid formula allows you to know there will be multiple dimensions to any question. There will be this view and that view in relationship to this view. Thesis, antithesis. For every action there's a reaction. The law of opposites, duality, polarity. And then what you want to become is a synthesizer. After you break things down, you pull them back together again. Using caps, concepts. Everything is concepts. You don't see things singularly. You try to develop a concept around it. The most important concept is socialization. This institution is established because of the need to have an African socialization, developing the character, socializing function, as well as the tooling, technological function, skills function, and putting them together would be true education and development. We don't have that now, because we even have a situation now where they have separation of church and state, which implies that you're not even supposed to teach character. character is supposed to be taught at home, but the home is supposed to teach everything. The first schooling and the first master teachers are in the home. And so we have to now reverse the process where we wait and hold our youngsters in a holding pattern for 5 or 6 years and then walk them into school. The education of our youngsters should be occurring before they are born. That the path is laid out for them, and that the mothers are prepared before they have the children, and the fathers are prepared before they have the children, and our family structures are structured so we don't have no concept of a young girl having a child and calling that a family. That's not a family, that's a survival unit. The family is the complexities of the various levels of interconnection spiritually. That's what a family is. An African family tradition, and that's what got us this far, involves many levels of family relationships. An African young girl on the continent, if she's got 6 brothers before she gets married, she knows she has 6 fathers for her child. If she's got 6 sisters, she knows she has 6 mothers for the child beside herself. When she marries, and you don't marry because of the pitter-patter of the heart, you marry because of some other important connectedness that the family are about. And since we ain't having success with the pitter-patter of the heart, we better come up with another formula and how we even match our people up. So we don't have to deal with the whole deal when we really get down to it. But look at this. In the African tradition of communal, corporate, and collective spiritual development, if the mother has 6 brothers and 6 sisters, there's 6 fathers and 6 mothers for the child. If the man she marries has 6 brothers and 6 sisters, there's 6 more fathers and mothers for the child. So the child grows up with multiple mothers and multiple fathers. All the women in the compound, the aunties, the grandmothers, are the mothers of the child. How did we get to a situation where we're talking about single-parent families? That's not an African process. That's something that comes out of the European context of corporate exploitation of the family, a labor unit. So we have to restructure even the family. So as we get to the basics of what we have to do and dealing with the community power versus corporate, white corporate power, we have to structure African corporate power. That means coming together collectively. Economically, we need to start buying our food together. Why don't we have a process where we are so connected that we go by wholesale and then we distribute the stuff to ourselves, retail, with the profits going into a common economic endeavor? You see, we need to understand this. It hit me like a brick a few years ago with a friend of mine, Dr. John Kennard. He told me that Washington is being turned over to the Asians. That's the quid pro quo of bringing the money from Hong Kong into Washington. They can feed black people. And so we went out to outskirts of Washington, and there's these big food distribution places. The Asians go in the front door. No, let's turn that around. Black people go in the front door. We're so glad to get in the front door, we don't know what to do. We roll up into our BMW and go into the front door and get a couple of bunches of carrots. Asians roll the truck around the back and go away with a truckload of carrots to be distributed to the family. Do you understand the difference between you pulling up in your BMW, getting a couple of bunches of carrots for you to juice on your juicer, as opposed to a corporate entity pulling a truck around the back and going away with a truckload of carrots at a reduced price to distribute to the family? There's a whole other thinking that we have to be about if we're going to put the economic, politics, and culture together that makes sense. And as we do, and we make Sankaray work and we make the Institute work, then there are 3 things that have to connect. Ontology sounds heavy, but that's way noble. The question of being has to be clarified. Most of us think that we are Americans and we're not Africans. But I tell you, within 20 minutes I got my whole class African once I lay it down for them. Even the Spanish-speaking ones African. French-speaking ones, the Creole-speaking ones are. People from Barbados speaking the Queen's English become African. And then when they leave my class, they spread the word. Don't go into a class unless you're African. So when I got my next class that came in, those students had me before. That was upper level class. So when I said Hotep, they said Hotep. When I asked them who's African, everybody said they're African. But then my next 12 o'clock class came in, and when I had 60 new people, so I said Hotep. Surprisingly, everybody said Hotep. And I said, how many Africans we got here? All the hands went up. Boom! The word had gotten around the college within an hour that you don't walk into his class unless you know that you're African. But we deal with it systematically. We tell them to write 10 analytical essays, 50 analytical essays. The first analytical essay is to go home to your parents and tell your parents that you're African. Now this is dangerous for some of them. They may have to put some karate protection on them. But what you want them to do is to see the context in which their consciousness of themselves and Africa emerged. In the most strategic unit of socialization, because what the key concept of concepts, analysis, processes, and systems, that's that capstone that I was trying to get you to do. Concepts, analysis, processes, and systems. The key concept that we have to be about as we organize our communities and we deal with African corporate power and community control as opposed to European materialistic multinational corporate power. The key concept is socialization. How you develop your values, your beliefs, your role models, your patterns of behavior. How you become who and what you are. And most of us are processed by the larger system to become other than what God made us, African.
Yes.
We're processed into believing that we are African/American. We've got to put that American in. America is just an accident. Your Africanness is what God made you, what Mother Nature affirmed you to be. And so we are not able to affirm that because Africa is written so negative, so largely negative across the world that we are not. But once you write in the truth about Africa, it only takes me 20 minutes to lay it down. The students immediately respond. And those that were Spanish and thought that their Spanishness gave them something special, and they could not identify African because they had the Spanish cover. Once you pull that cover off, you got to give them something to hang on to. But if you give them Africa as the foundation of the human family, then they'll shed that language thing that gives them that little special something. We have some people who speak French. Je parle très bien le français, très comme le français. On a fait mes études de docteur et j'ai fait de langue française. I speak French, but that don't make me French. You know, but you have some black people who learn a little French, or their mother spoke French, and they think they're French. But Africa is written so large negatively in their mind, and blackness in general, that if you don't give them the positive, they can't affirm the self. So what we make sure we do quickly is affirm the self. So by the time that first essay comes around, they're ready to go into their home and tell their parents and their brothers and sisters and uncles that they're African. And then jump back and wait for the response. But it's amazing because they can see the context in which they were instilled values. Because the family is the first unit of the 5 major units of socialization. Family is number 1, school is number 2, church is number 3, peer group is number 4, and job is number 5. For the African, it's really 6. The family is number 1, but it's the spiritual family, not that labor unit that lives on 39th Street. You're talking about the extended family for the African. And so your grandfather and your uncle may have as much to do with your learning and development as the biological father in the African family. And so that's why for us to say single mothers, it's not a, it's what do they call it, an oxymoron for African people. You know, even if she doesn't have her own blood to be around her, then the community surrounds her. The community is her blood. And a woman that has a child, a young girl that has a child, all she has to do is go into a church, and the people there will take care of her and the child. So this whole concept that we have is now working for the European corporate entities, which has criminalized our race, as Dr. Shasi McIntyre has laid out, and has prepared us for the corporate penal process and industry in which they're making money by the billions on the prison. And so if you push the African youngsters out on the street You suck them into drugs. You make a profit by pushing them out on the street because you got all these services that they control that are supposed to be taking care of them. You suck them into the drug situation, and then you got money being made in this illegal sale and laundering of drug money. And then when they get caught and sucked into the prison system, you got the prison industry that is becoming one of the fastest growing profitable aspects of the corporate structure. So we have to see this and begin to understand this and make the changes. Number one, take control of our families. And in that, controlling our young people. I'm the product, not of a school system, I'm the product of a mother. Conceived of greatness for her youngsters before we were born. My mother said her kids were going to be somebody, and so she married somebody who could help her fulfill that dream. And she lived in a community where people shared the dream. And so we had a village. We didn't wait for Miss Clinton to tell us about you need a village to raise a child. We were raised in this village. So, and then we have to develop the concepts, the African concepts that can make a difference. Developing corporate structures emulating European is not good enough, because the profit mind of the rich get richer and the poor be damned is not what we can have. That's not what our ancestors laid down for us. We have a context of sharing and caring. And so, the kids I grew up with, we just met last Saturday, hundreds of us. I'm 62 years old. This group meets every month and have a major dinner dance every couple of years because we had a family and we still are connected. Okay. And, you know, even though I've been able to travel around the world, I'm still little Lenny. I know I've been with Alex Haley and Dr. Clark and Kwame Nkrumah and everybody else. Been to with Winnie Mandela and whatnot, but I'm still little Lenny. And so it helps to make you humble, it makes you real, and doesn't allow you to get involved in the European VIP. Because at one polarity, at the top of the pyramid, you have concepts, analysis, processes, and systems. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Break the situation down in terms of concepts. Understanding the economic. Always ask yourself, what's the economic factor involved? What's the political factor involved? What's the cultural factor involved? And then analysis. Look for various views. Your view should not be firmly developed until you've seen other views.
Yes.
My wife told me that. I had to learn that the hard way. In a marriage, there's several views. There's several views. And then, you know, if you have a split wife, she's not only dealing with your view, she's dealing with the view that your mama instilled in you. That mama's view is still there. And in my case, it would be Papa, my mother's father, because she instilled his view. So if you want to understand me, you just can't see my view. You got to see my mama's view. You got to see her father's view. And then after looking at those several levels of view, you can understand. And that's the only way I understand why I became a race leader, why I became a Pan-Africanist, because my mother's father, my grandfather, was a Pan-Africanist coming up from Virginia. He was a Garveyite. And that was instilled in me. So if you want to understand me and why, and so she had to do that. She had to develop that, because why are you doing so much outside of the family and not taking care of business here at home? How come you ain't fixed the roof, and how come you ain't fixed the back, and you going around helping Chris and helping this and helping that in Detroit, and going up to Canada, going to England, going to South America, going to Brazil. But she's understood that it's in me. It was instilled in me. I was socialized that way. And that's why those youth in South Africa, we owe them a great deal, because when they struck a blow for freedom and said, we're not going to accept the Bantu education, which instills white superiority in black youngsters, and we want a liberating process. These youngsters gave their lives. Steve Biko had his brain bashed out. And if you put a systems analysis to South Africa, and this particular document, this book I wrote, was designed to get the churches around the world to support the struggle in South Africa to a greater extent. But what it did, because I have this systems analysis built into how I approach things, it allowed me to dissect what apartheid really was and is. And it's not about separate development. It's not about separate toilets. It's about corporate control of power in destruction of African community power.
We got that here.
And the key is to destroy the mind to control the family. But because of the European corporate system being based upon profit making, you had to keep the family intact enough as a labor unit to exploit it. Keep the men strong enough so they could work in the mines miles down. And so they destroyed the African family. Now Nelson Mandela comes out of jail, but he didn't come out to restructure the family. They brought him out of jail. You have to say to yourself, you got to look at Nelson, what he went through. You look at Winnie, what she's gone through, and then you have to see the children who changed the consciousness of South Africa. In the luggage I left at the airport, we had some books by Amos Wilson. One of the books is called The Falsification of African Consciousness. The system is controlling the mind, and they falsify the African consciousness. These students understood that. Children understood it, and they stood up before the guns. That's a wake-up call for all black people. It was a wake-up call for Winnie Mandela. Winnie was not inspired into consciousness by Nelson being in jail, breaking rocks and reading books. It was the children dying that shook Winnie up to her core, and other women. And when the women and the children stood up, the people who control the apartheid power corporate structure said, the ball game is over. If you can't control the mind of the children, and the women are going to stand up with the children, the ball game is over. And so they brought Nelson Mandela out, not to reform South Africa or to liberate it, but to manage the corporate plantation called the Republic of South Africa.
Thank you.
And that's what Nelson is doing. You have to praise him, you have to raise him because of how he suffered and prevailed for the 27 years. You can't take his glory away from him, but you got to be cold-blooded. That's a micro-analysis. You need a macro-analysis, not his personal understanding of him. Appreciate him. But the macro-analysis says that the European system is still in place. And he has come out to manage it, not to change it, not to reform it. They brought him to stop the African flow and revolution. And so we need to understand that. The basis for the system I outlined it here is economics, politics, and culture. The Dutch descendants, the Boers, to control the system in South Africa and give them a play in the global world system. Economics was controlled, first principle, by what? A secret society. Not a spiritual society like the African brotherhoods and sisterhoods, but a secret blood oath society like the Ku Klux Klan called the Broederbond, where 20,000 Afrikaner men are sworn to maintain power with a blood oath. 1,000 ministers of the Dutch Reformed Church have sworn a blood oath to maintain white power in South Africa. Unless Nelson Mandela deconstructs the Broederbond, unless it declares that it no longer functions on the principles of its function, there's no power play in South Africa that Nelson Mandela can exercise unless he challenges the Broederbond. That's the economics control that the Dutch put in place. Politics, the Dutch put in place a corporate entity called the Nationalist Party. The Nationalist Party is still there. It's a fascist party. It tried to join the Nazis in 1942. It wrote a constitution to join the Nazis. That's the party that controlled apartheid after World War II up until recently. It's still there. It hasn't declared itself not what it was and is. And then you got the Dutch Reformed Church. And that controls the culture. And the Dutch Reformed Church says that there is a segregated heaven. One for the Dutch Protestants, one for the Catholics, one for the Asians, special one for the Japanese, one for the colored, and one for the Africans. That's the insanity of their religion. In this document, I'm talking about all the world's religious traditions declaring apartheid a heresy against God, a crime against humanity. But the Dutch Reformed Church wouldn't do it because their cultural white supremacy says that God gave them South Africa, that they have a covenant with God that was cemented at Blood River when they beat the Africans in a military battle. So they've taken the Old Testament covenant and translated it into their covenant of white supremacy. This is the corporate structures we are up against. The same is true in America. Same is true in England. We're up against corporate entities of white supremacy. America's not going to give us any land.
That's right.
They could have, after slavery, rewarded us with reparations that we should have.
Right.
They have been giving reparations to white folks from the beginning of this nation. The nation was founded on freedom, justice, and equality. No, it wasn't. Don't be saying right. It was not. That's the myth and mess that they put out there. The nation was founded on inequality, slavery, and criminality. They took somebody else's land, ran them off the land, killed them, beat them up, mistreated them, and then they brought somebody else over to work them to death and declared them not human. And the thing is that the people they declared not human are the human family. We have to understand what enslavement was. They tried to strip us from our humanity. Our great struggle, our journey has been to restore African humanity. Our struggle for this knowledge and this wisdom is to restore African humanity. Our fight against negative imaging in Hollywood is to restore African humanity. Our fight to make the Christian traditions and the Arab Muslim traditions that we have and the European Jewish traditions we have, to blacken them up, to African them up, is to put African humanity in its proper position. We produce those religious traditions. And all of them rendered us not human. All of them rendered us cursed. And so we have to understand that Arab culture, European white culture, and European Jewish culture is based upon a system of white supremacy.
That's right.
And so as we put the truth in there, we can restore it. But as we also look at the truth, the Europeans are already rewarding them. When they ended slavery, Professor Scobie in this document outlined, end of slavery in the British colonies and slave system, plantations. They had a big dilemma. The question was whether to reward the enslavers or to reward the people enslaved. And the Bank of Rothschild helped to solve that problem. And they concluded they don't have to give a dime to the enslaved, meaning us, and give 20 million pounds, in those days that's like $1 billion, to the enslaved. So reparations is a part of the game, but they can't give it to us. At the time they were fighting the Civil War, you had 1862, 1863, the Homestead Act, giving away land. They could have given us land, but that meant putting an economic base under the black community, and they don't want that. So we have to be super slick in our institutes and in our trials and tribulations and put an economic foundation under us. We have the mother continent, Africa, the richest real estate in the world. We have productive black people in the Caribbean here and in Brazil that are very productive, producing billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. If we had an economic plan, a political plan, and a cultural plan, we could put in place what Dr. Clark refers to as a Pan-African world union. And then we'd be on our way. Other people have fought for a piece of Emerald Isle called Ireland, and they're willing to die for it. There's no way you can compare Ireland with the African continent. Others have fought over some sand in the so-called Middle East, called Palestine or Israel. It's not comparable to the African continent, but we don't have that dynamic of fighting for that mother Africa and linking her to her children scattered throughout the planet. If that plan is initiated in the 21st century AD, we're on our way. That's the blueprint for black power that Amos Wilson is talking about. That's the work of Dr. Clark, and he was trying to complete his last great work, which would have been Pan-Africanism or perish. That's the design of the work I'm working with. Pan-Africanism or Perish. Reparations now. Randall Robinson wrote a book, Defending the Spirit. And once he got into serious research and understanding what was happening and cut himself away from these Negroes trying to hold them back, his latest book coming out in January or thereafter is going to be The Debt. What is owed black people. The debt. What is owed black people. And until you can articulate that, you can't look white folks in the eye and have them understand what you're talking about. What you owe us can never be repaid. We brought you forth. And so as you put the African trilogy of knowledge together and dealing with ontology, being, we got to move away from defining ourselves as Negroes. That was a survival mode. It got us this far. It cannot take us into the 21st century. We can't dismiss what our parents and grandparents did. I can't dismiss what my great-grandfather did in Georgia and what my grandfather did after slavery and building schools and churches and maintaining a family clan of 13 kids and his brother's 16 kids, and from that came us. I got to honor that. But that was survival culture. That's not going to take us into this conflict with the great cultural development of the Indian tribe and the Chinese tribe, and now the Arabs solidifying, and the Europeans solidifying. If the Africans don't solidify, we will be the doormats of the rest of the world into the 21st century. So we have no other choice but to follow the imperatives of the legacy. And the legacy of struggle means we move from the survival culture that has gotten us this far into developmental culture. So we start turning our money over in our community. We're very productive people, but it's not productivity for ourselves. We have our people producing rap music that's become a billion-dollar industry, but it's still controlled by the mob. It's still controlled by people who want to be the mob. And then we got our people who think that they should be the mob. The music development that our people have created should be designed to unify us. And that wealth should be designed to enhance us, not to create stupidity like that brother Hammer, who in his high day built a $20 million home in Oakland. He could have been a whole housing estate with $20 million. That could have helped a whole lot of people. And then he could have turned it over, and once he built with a 5-year plan of building 100 houses, then turn it over and build another 100 houses. He could have transformed Oakland. But instead he built himself a $20 million house. And it didn't take him long to lose it all. Okay? So that's the type of Negro survival that won't get us into the 21st century. But African communal, corporate, and collective development will. So we have to define ourselves as African. And then epistemology. Epistemology has nothing to do with pissing, it has to do with knowing. Ontology has to do with being, and we are African, as Asa Hilliard says. It's not a question of be or not to be, it's to be African or not to be. And epistemology is this enormous flow of knowledge. Everywhere, this sister producing her book, she was one of the greatest supporters of the black struggle from a sister's point of view that I know. She was next to Barbara Sachs, next to Mr. Farrakhan, next to myself, next to Dr. Clark, next to James Turner, next to Ronald Walters, next to Ron Daniels. This is a sister you've not even heard of. You haven't even heard of Shashi McIntyre. She was with Omari Abadeli in the NCOBRA. She was with us in ASCAP. She was with us in the AfricanCentered movement. When they came after me, she was willing to take over the chairmanship in my stead. To fool them, but a couple of Negroes on my staff prevented us from bringing her in. Because they were suspicious of, she was light-skinned. They were suspicious that she had been in the military. So is she CIA? We had worked out a deal where she was going to cover my butt, let me run the program, and she would be there so they wouldn't have any excuse to go through the insanities that they went through. But some Negroes on my staff, in the family, messed up that process. We just lost her a few months ago. But I want to tell you that the spirit of this sister will always live with me and others. She was that powerful. And she had Native American background, so she always raised the Native American as well as the African. Dr. Shashi McIntyre. And Amos Wilson is a school of knowledge. We had several books by him, but I only was able to get a couple. The bag of books is in the airport. They're supposed to be bringing it. What time is it? Yes, plane is probably landing now with my book. But we had the falsification of African consciousness by Amos Wilson. Black on black violence, which you usually hear about, but for Amos Wilson, it is in the service of the system of white supremacy. Awaken the genius of the black child, another one of his books. Developmental psychology of the black child. This brother was a genius, but we lost him at the age 54 or so because of stress. And we didn't support him. He got kicked out of the university. I couldn't bring him into my staff because we're part of the same university system. So he went on the street, 125th Street, to try to set up a business. And our people didn't realize we had a genius in our midst. And we couldn't support him. Can you imagine on 125th Street in the most significant black community in the world, we couldn't support a black scholar who produces this type of work? So that's why I said we've got to change and move into the African concept of communal, cooperative, and collective spiritual development, and then we're on our way. Ontology, defining ourselves as African. Epistemology, tapping into African knowledge. That doesn't mean dismissing the Europeans. Master the Europeans. But you better have mastery of yourself before you master the European, otherwise you'll think you're becoming a European. I want to master the Greeks. After Diop's book and what he had laid down about the Greeks, I'm going to get into the Greeks behind as far as I can get up into it. Because the Greeks have the highest level that the Europeans raised themselves. And they were children in comparison to the Africans. So we need to master the Greeks. We need to understand the Romans. We need to understand the Catholic Church. So you have to have at this polarity African knowledge, the foundation of all knowledge, and at the opposite polarity, European knowledge, but master the two and then synthesize it. So you can make the comparison. If people talk about 10 Commandments, you can say, yes, that's beautiful. You know, praise the Lord, and Moses and everything else. But you know, thousands of years before there was 10, there was 147, it was institutionalized down to 42. And this becomes the moral and ethical principles of the greatest civilization of the ancient world. And then when we start to deal with the symbols that are an important part of our knowledge as we empower ourselves, we have to take that symbol of the phalanx, the symbol of the penis. You see it right there, that black figure, that Washington Monument, and show that to be what it is, a school of African knowledge with principles and moral and ethical foundations and concepts. Has nothing to do with a rich white man with property of power called a slave master bastard George Washington. It's a deep symbol of the principle of the male and the female in balance and harmony. A deep symbol of the ability of the female to generate life, nurture life, sustain life, and then resurrect life. A deep symbol of the need for a spiritual sisterhood to resurrect the family and the God figure, male. It's a symbol of the struggle of good over evil and the triumph of good over evil. It's a symbol of the good brother being killed by the bad brother, but the sisters bonding together, pulling the good brother back into life. It's a symbol of the Son of God fighting his evil uncle and losing his eye, but getting an all-seeing eye. It's a symbol of a crucified Savior, Osiris, a star, before there was a crucified Jesus. So just that one symbol is a deep process of African thought that we need to master. And that's why the European has taken all of our symbols and used them himself. A pillar temple, the Greeks used it and built the Parthenon. But the Parthenon is it's not even a religious institution. Marathon. It's not comparable to the Pillar Temple in the Nile, which is a temple of spiritual development, the greatest learning institution in the world. That's what inspired the Greeks to build their temple to the Greek warrior, the Parthenon, and that's what inspired the Lincoln Memorial. But all of them go back to the original, which is the great university temple of Waset. Okay. So, but you need to know that. Sankara needs to know that. Even though the great university in Timbuktu is what this school is named for, they need to know that that was one of the children of the great Waset University Temple along the Nile, where the Greeks wanted to go to sit at the feet of the Africans. And if Anaximander, Thales, Anaxagoras, if Pythagoras studied in the Nile, that's where they went, to sit at the feet of the Africans. learning these African symbols and African schools of thought. The symbol of the falcon, the symbol of the feather of truth, the symbol of the scale of justice, the symbol of the ka and the ba, the symbol of the ankh, the symbol of the ujet, the symbol of the jed column. All of these have to do with character development that was part of the learning process. Africans developing a tradition of controlling their socialization from before the womb till after the tomb. We've really got to go back to that. Controlling socialization, how you transmit values from before the womb to after the tomb. So we need to control the raising of our young women and young men. There needs to be age grade educational processes. You raise a group of youngsters together. You instill values with them. And then at the age of 12 or 13, just as the Jews have the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah, they got that from us. And we don't have it anymore. There needs to be a manhood and a womanhood ceremony to acknowledge the educational and socialization process you brought your child through. We did this with my nephew, Hakim Sekou, named after Sekou Touré, and his brother was there, participating with him, Hassan Kwame, named after Kwame Touré. And that was about 15 years ago, and I gave my brother a $1,000 check to get them a computer. And the young man, after we put him through some rituals and whatnot, had to get up and tell the family what he was going to do for self and family and for the race. And to the blessing of our families, these youngsters have not given us a negative day in their lives. 2 men child. Can you imagine? Only because of control of the socialization. The uncle, myself, is a part of the raising these children, the grandmothers, the mothers. My brother is a master psychologist, raising his young brothers, young son, these brothers, not making the mistakes that might have been made in our growing up. And so his oldest son graduated from NYU Law School. At the top of the law school, I've head of Jews and Asians. He was a graduation speaker. Do you know what it meant to me to have them call his name Hakim Sekou Jeffries? I was up on my feet with my fist in the air. That's a triumph. They know he's my nephew. They would have been wanting to destroy him. He had to be extra special and powerful and strong to have been getting that position. And even when they offered him the editorship of the Law Review, he said, Uncle Ed, it's too much work. I'll take associate editor. That's straight. The trustees are trying to be the Law Review editor who have taken him from the path that he was in. He wants to work with his community. He's in the corporate structure now, but his ultimate desire is to work with the community. And his younger brother, the older one went north with the whites, in the white school. And I had been encouraging my god kids to go south. And the younger one took me up on it, and he went down to Morehouse. So he's a Morehouse fan.
Oh, yeah.
But when it came time to graduating from Morehouse, I was disappointed. Because the Negro, he got 2 B's. You know, he missed getting all A's for 4 years in college by 2 grades. And I referred to him as a Negro because when he got the first B after about 30 A's, I said, wait a minute, what is happening here? Are you failing the family and your God by getting to sleep? And so as I said, it was in religion, and your mama's been taking you to church ever since you could blink. So he said, Uncle Lenny, I got an A in that class. I don't know why the professor gave me a B. Go to the professor and get your A straightened out. And he did. But he never followed it up. The professor said, yeah, you deserve an A. He never followed it up. So when it came time for a valedictorian, he missed out. Because he had these 2 B's. But the fact that he could even seek perfectibility is what shocked me, because I couldn't do it. And I'm one of the most brilliant persons walking the planet. I couldn't see myself going to no college for 4 years getting all A's. And Morehouse is an elite school. But listen to this. Uncle's ego was hurt. And it was really hurt when I went to the graduation and heard one of our supreme Negroes, a Negro achiever, the graduation speaker, Judge He didn't know. And he was running down this beach that had these young people cringing because he was trying to take them back to the 40s, 50s, and maybe even the 30s. I wanted to run up and grab the mic. But you know, Atlanta is so proper that, you know, even though I was wearing my flowing African robe, I still had to be proper. I couldn't even yell out and scream and say, no! You can't do it! But see, I work in the spiritual way. And I called upon the African Holy Ghost. I had passed a family on the lawn. You know, we got 10,000 people out here. And I just passed a family that just attracted me because they had kufi, Kente cloth, African dress. They just looked so good. So, you know, I thought I should go up and say, you know, y'all look good. And I did. And then I walked off. And then came time for the valedictorian of this class at Morehouse. And some bald-headed Negro got up. The head of the class. He had gotten all A's and posed. This Negro took the mic and told Bud. He took the class into the 21st century. I was so proud I didn't know what to do. I was one to yell and scream, hey, hey! What I want to say and do, he did. That's what I'm saying. We don't have to all do it. He did it. I ain't never seen this bald head sucker before in my life, but I was feeling so close to him. So I saw his brother. I told his brother, I said, after your brother finishes with the news people, Cameron, I'd like to say hello to him. I'm right here. You know, he's being interviewed, not too far from me. And after he finishes, the younger brother goes over to him. And this is ironic, because I'm standing with my younger brother who's bald-headed. I guess bald-head is the rage these days. My hair just fell out, but these people are taking the hair off. So the young brother goes up to his older brother who just finished giving this fantastic speech and tells him that Dr. Jeffries would like him. He didn't say my name. He said somebody would like to say hello to you. This young dude turns around, sees me, and falls to his knees. That told me up. I had never seen this dude in my life. But whatever we've been doing had impacted on him. I had to pull him up from his knees. And then we hugged. And come to find out he's going to Africa. And I wanted to connect with him going to Africa. And then he was going to go to England. But he's prepared to handle England. Because he had a foundation. And then come to find out. Because you know my ego is hurt. I want my nephew to be able to, but come to find out that family that I walked past with all that Africans to do, that was his family. Plainfield, Jersey. That was his family. I said, well, I'll be the African Holy Ghost. It couldn't have been better than that. Because I would have expected my nephew to do a good job. But to see it spread around, it was fantastic. But that's why did this youngster produce what he produced? Because of the socialization. It's obvious in the family that a lot of people have put their hands on him. So that's what we have to do, develop African systems of social development, moving into developmental culture as opposed to survival culture. So ontology needs to be understood. You need to be African. Epistemology needs to be enhanced. We need to have this explosion of knowledge institutionalized so it becomes part of our life practice. And then at the top of the pyramid of knowledge is axiology. Axiology is the transmission of values. Europeans have instilled their values in us. We cannot be until we purge ourselves of them and instill ourselves into new African values, that we take some of the old and the past, and we make them new for us. I'm going to try to wind it up now. This is a chart which I think is very important, African cultural forms. And there you have the scarab beetle. There you have the ankh. But here you have the sonka for bird, with the male and the female with equal dignity together. So it's an upholding of a deep African principle of the complementarity of the male and the female. And then you have none but God. So African's culture is spiritual. It's not a culture of materialism alone, although it's rich materially, but it's a culture of spirituality. And then here you have the Ashanti stool. The concept of a stool, when my brother's kid was being ritualized for the manhood ceremony, we had him sit on a stool. Because the Akan culture has this concept that the stool is the repository of the soul of the nation, or the soul of the village, or the soul of the ethnic group, or the soul of the family. And so it's important for us to develop this concept that you can institutionalize a spirituality in a symbol. Well, that's what white folks do all the time. The wrong symbol. Like they'll take the cross and they'll make it a symbol of death, going throughout the world killing in the name of the cross. Or people who are Arab Muslims will take the crescent and the star and use it as a symbol to kill the infidels. That destruction has wreaked havoc on African peoples with a double whammy, coming from the east with Islam and the north, and coming from the west and the south with the cross. And so this is a cultural chart which will help us put some of our key symbols in place, just as this chart also helps us deal with the concept of the, not obelisk, but the tekenu, or the teken. The concept of Ma'at, the spiritual entity, the deity that represents the spiritual, moral, and ethical principles. The concept of a holy name. The concept of the wings of the falcon. And so we have that on our dollar bill. The concept of the scarab beetle, the very simple creature that represents the cycles of life that exist. Wherever we go in church, you have people holding up their hands to Jesus. Well, this is the holding up the hands to the concept of the soul, the ka, the concept of the ka and the ba, the spiritual and the physical soul, the double soul, the ujek, the concept of the eye. So our cultures are deep with these traditions. And so as we move into ontology, epistemology, and axiology, values, the transmission of values, we need to begin to understand that. And again, you see the columns. The Africans didn't wait for the Greeks to create columns. Columns were part of the African, but each African column in the great temple represents a moral and ethical principle of Ma'at. So that's why these charts, wherever I go, I take them because they can help us make the culture a part of our practice. As you put together your libraries, Roots, Alex Haley, needs to be understood. The question of socialization is key. Kunta Kinte, willing to die for maintenance of his Africanness. But the manhood ceremonies and whatnot that brought him into manhood become important. Some of that history we pulled together in this document called The African Americans, The Search for Truth and Knowledge. And what we have to point out and what we have to build on is there are three aspects of our great African truth. I call it African primacy. Around the world, Europeans are saying, Dr. Jeffries, he has a concept of African supremacy. We're not talking about superiority or supremacy. Europeans worry about that. But we're talking about the truth. And the truth is that we have woven our knowledge and the knowledge of Sankara and the knowledge in our study groups and whatnot should be focused on the foundation of three enormous African truths. Number one in the pyramid of knowledge around that thesis is the concept of origin. Within our Judeo-Christian heritage, we talk about the Garden of Eden, and we got white folks around Adam being the origin of human family. Science and history says there's an African origin based upon the ancient fossil finds going back millions of years. There's no European origin of anything in terms of human development. There's an African origin. European says, well, that's a monogenetic analysis. That's Dr. Shekan Diep, his great book, Civilization, Barbarism, and all his books you should have in your library. And so what they're saying is that that's not the only concept that one would have, because there's also the possibility of other centers of human development taking place, and so there's a polycentric approach to looking at humanity. And I laugh, and I make it very clear that if you're talking about monogenetic, all of us coming from one line, or polycentric, coming from various centers, it's still African. There's no European in the equation. There's no Arabs. There's no Asians. There's no Eskimos. There's no Native Americans. Anytime you're talking about an ancient human on the planet, you're talking African. So if you're talking monogenetic coming from one line, it's African. If you're talking polycentric coming from various centers, it's still African. And that's when you have the knowledge, you can lay it out before the European. He can't contest you. That's why nobody contests me. They just run a negative thing in the newspapers and wherever. Nobody wants to sit down and discuss anything with me because the knowledge is so clear. It's not something that I developed, it's something that I tapped into. It was there. Other great scholars like Dr. Diep and others have developed it. Other great scholars like Chancellor Williams developed a program of Africanism. There's a program that Marcus Garvey developed. I have developed a program of African resurrection based upon some knowledge out of air. It's based upon the programs laid down by our people. Malcolm, when he left the nation, had a program of African development. And all of these are centered around the building of the family as the first unit, the extended family, as the primary foundation. So that when we deal with these things, we need to have in place what we're serious about. And so if you have the first origin, there's an African origin of humankind. Now, even if you want to deal with the Garden of Eden, you got to put it in Africa somewhere. You can't put it in England. You can't put it in the Great Ice Age. So we'll take even the Christian, Judeo-Christian version of origin. We'll take that too and blacken up. One of my partners from Chicago once prepared two books, The Black Presence of the Bible. You need to get that and put that in your library. So at the first primary foundation of knowledge is the African origin of humankind. No Europeans there. Beautiful. Then, at the opposite polarity, you have the African evolution of society as humankind evolves into large-brain humans. Diep says early humans evolved 6 early hominids. 3 never left Africa, 3 left Africa. And they produced Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens is modern humanity. Goes back a couple 100,000 years. This is what biology and microbiology is telling us. And there's no Europeans there. There's no Asians. It's just African. There's no Arabs. So the evolution of humanity is African, as well as the origin of humanity. And then the third factor is the cradle of civilization. 10,000 years ago, the Sahara began to dry up. People started moving with concentration into the Nile Valley, a special ecology that was regular, it overflowed. It created a blessed ecology that you could have high agricultural development, and that became the basis for the early civilizations in the river valley. So when you're talking about a cradle of civilization, you're not talking about Europe, you're talking about Africa. Or you're talking about the other sun peoples in the Tigris-Euphrates, or in India, or in China, or the lakes and rivers of Central and South America. You're not talking about Europeans when you're talking about evolution of society, origin of humanity, or cradles of civilization. And so that's the foundation on which we build our understanding of truth and knowledge. So in this particular document, I talk about Africa, the light of the world. The continent of light, not the dark continent. We talk about the struggle of black folks, our journey. And one of the enormous struggles, and I mention it there, but this particular booklet has it in its fullness. One of the greatest stories not told. Black folk who fought in the American Revolutionary War on the British side, answering the call of their God to take up arms to restore their humanity before Jefferson penned a Declaration of Independence. He did that 75, 76. By 1775, these brothers had already left by the tens of thousands and sisters, tens of thousands, and joined the British ranks and took up arms And when the Americans saw their black power leaving them,
Yes.
they woke up quick and said, we better put black folks in arms on the American side and give them freedom. So black folk fought on both sides of the Revolutionary War as free men and women. There's not a word of it in the history book. And those blacks who stayed in America free began to buy their people out of slavery. So by the 1790 census, you had 80 to 90,000 free blacks. So many that the white folks got scared. By 1800, they started beating up on the free blacks. Jefferson and Washington passing laws. Of course, the Haitian Revolution scared them half to death, too, because these free blacks knew about the Haitian Revolution, so you had the Foster Rebellion. But those blacks that fought on the British side, and one of the greatest stories that hasn't been told, they went to Canada, 1783, took their schools, their churches, their paramilitary structures, their family structures, planted them in Canada, thought they could flower, but the British did not fulfill their promises, so by 1792 they petitioned the British king that we want our land, and they found out there was a movement back to Africa, so they went back to Canada. They told the people, you can go back to Africa or you can stay in Canada. So many of them wanted to go back to Africa, they didn't have enough ships. But 15 ships with 1,200 black men and women sailed from Canada to Africa. Getting off the ships, singing their hymns of praise, getting off the ships, taking the forest down, putting up their churches and their schools and their homes, and establishing Freetown in Sierra Leone. One of the greatest stories that has not been told. It's a tragedy now that Freetown is being torn up. Sierra Leone is being torn up because of the diamonds there, and the diamond merchants are funding militias to destroy, have black folks destroy each other. But the history of the establishment of Sierra Leone is a glorious page in the history of our journey and our story, and it's not told. And that's why I said we need to put it in our history ourselves. It's just like Steve Biko's name is not raised. But it should be raised along with William and Dell. If you want to understand why Winnie and Nelson ain't together, it's because Winnie was a people's people. Nelson was involved with the Marxist struggle. That's where his consciousness comes from. And then he got caught up in the VIP. At the top of that pyramid, you have to ask yourself, the VIP, the European-style VIP is a very important person. That's what Nelson is. But the African VIP is African values for V, African interests for I, and African principles and precepts for P. And that's what Winnie is about. That's what the women's struggle is about. And Winnie said, I'll join this government, but if they don't serve our people, I'm going back to the bush. And we'll be fighting again. White folks haven't given up anything in South Africa. South Africa should have been the primary case of reparations. Reparations to build housing. And you can have a $10 to $20 billion housing plan for Russian Jews in Israel. You can have a $10 to $50 billion plan for housing in South Africa. Everybody has profited from the exploitation of South Africa gold and diamonds. The slums of Soweto should have been torn down by now. And when the kids refused to accept the national education and got killed, there were 2 million plus black youngsters from 76 who did not accept any education. They'd rather not be educated than be educated with the white insanity. One of the first things that Nelson Mandela should have done was to have recognized this and said that the world owes these South African youth an educational program to train young adults to get them prepared for the larger society. Nelson should never have accepted the leadership of South Africa without laying down his case for reparations for his people. No other nation could have been clear in what it could be and what it should have been. Every ounce of gold taken out of South Africa is recorded. Every diamond is recorded. They know the wealth that's taken out of South Africa. But you never heard him say reparations. He's from the old school. He represents Negro survival. He does not represent African development. And hopefully Winnie and the young people can put in place African development based upon our economics, our politics, and our culture in a systemic process so we can produce an African, pan-African system of growth and development. The brothers and sisters, I've talked too long. We should have some dialogue. Let me let you know that the struggle around Dr. J had to do with the corporate structure versus the community. The corporate structure versus African-centered education. In 1988, we were asked to come into the picture to evaluate the curriculum in New York. Clearly, after we looked at 150 documents, 4 consultants along with a task force of 20 people, it was clear that the curriculum in New York was a curriculum of exclusion, and if we wanted to go anywhere, we needed a curriculum of inclusion. But again, we need to put in place continually this dichotomy I'm talking about of corporate power in the service of white supremacy and community development in the service of African liberation. We need a curriculum of liberation, but they wouldn't even let us put in a Negro achievement curriculum of putting in a few Negro facts and dates in the white curriculum. Even that wasn't accepted. And so they decided to make me the boogeyman controlling education in New York. And all over the world, people think that I control the Board of Trustees, the Commission of Education, and education in New York. And we were just consultants. But this is a case of the corporate power. You need a systems analysis to understand the struggle over the curriculum. Most of us would be glad to put in a few black facts and dates, get a few blacks hired, have a few black principals, and we will think we have achieved. That's Negro achievement. They're not going to let you have an African school system. You're going to have to put it in your home or build your own institution. You can neutralize the worst aspects of white supremacy with Negro achievement, which is what we do, but we need to go beyond that. Jewish community does not lead to the public system to educate their children. Japanese do not lead to the public system to educate their children. It's the community as a whole that is the major thrust. Now, when we look at this question of the schooling and community control, a systems analysis, if applied, would have let us see, because when you put a systems analysis, what's the first question you ask? Of those 3 things I said about systems, you have to have what? Economics, in relationship to politics, and culture. We should have asked the economic question. Then we would have said, and we would have known that the reaction was going to be as strong as it was. You're talking about economics in New York City. $8 billion for education. In the state, maybe $15 billion. You're talking about putting a LeonardJeffries, who would bring Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben and everybody with him, in the middle of an $8 billion enterprise, a $15 billion enterprise. An economic analysis should have told us, brothers, they're going to bring everything they can muster down on all of y'all, which is what they did. Y'all think, people still think, oh, he mentioned Jews were involved in slavery, that's why they came after him. Oh, he mentioned that Washington, oh, he mentioned Hollywood. Oh, that's not what it's all about. We were in the middle of a $15 billion enterprise in the state of New York. Because of my white credentials, they were able to slip me in the middle of the thing. If New York goes, so goes the nation.
Yes.
You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in educational money that these folks knew that we were getting in the middle of. And they said, no, we're going to wipe you out. So the one I'm still alive. I'm a miracle. African Holy Ghost has done all kinds of things to make sure that I'm still here. I shouldn't be here. They had contracts on my life. I wanted to move professional for 4 years until it messed up my back. That's why you see me leaning now. So I got a bad back. I got to have a hip replacement. That not only comes from the bulletproof vest, but you know, I thought I was Jackie Robinson when I was a kid. And used to run up and down the bases, slide. And sliding on the hip 1,000 times caused some problems. So the doctor said, you're going to have a real hip replacement. I said, no, I ain't. Because they'll probably kill me before I needed to be worried about a hip replacement. I don't worry about replacement. But you have to understand that my life is endangered because we were in the middle of an economic enterprise. They didn't care whether we put black history in the curriculum. But you're messing with money, consultancy, salaries. You're messing with money that they shipped off and shipped to Israel. You see? So we need an economic analysis. And then politics. You don't want an African conscious curriculum in the schools because you'd wake up the community. And not just the children. I said that it should be a community enterprise. The parents need to be in it, grandparents need to be in it, the uncles need to be in the schools. So the schools become a catalyst for our political awakening and consciousness. Well, they didn't want that. And then culturally, they have us sucked into the culture of white supremacy.
Yes.
So that's why when you do a self-analysis, you know good well that you are so much a part of this system.
Yes.
That a comfortable bed, a big car, a house with about 10 rooms and a TV in 6 of the rooms, including the bathroom, thick carpet that you can feel when you walk across between your toes. This is what we've been trained to believe is the thing. It's real. Even for those of us seriously African-centered. The real sacrifices that we have to make, we're not prepared to make. We go to Africa. We can take you all to Africa. And we want you to go next summer. Last week in July, first week in August. Stop buying all that garbage you buy and save your money.
Yes.
Y2K is coming up anyway. You need to start doing something besides buying. Because Y2K people might come and take it out. You know, if you got too much, they might come and take it. But at any rate, we need to go to Africa. But if this group went to Africa, I want to tell you what's going to happen. Because since 1961, I've been taking people to Africa. Been to Africa 100 times. I'm going to get some complaints from some of y'all because the towels in the bathroom ain't fluffy enough. Some of y'all are going to complain because where is the McDonald's and the Kentucky Fried? Others are going to complain because there's a creature in my room, Dr. Jeffries. Now, when we're home, we got to worry about these creatures because you got mice, and then in New York you got the New York rat, the super rat, and he's a terror. You don't want to mess with the super rat. He eats through concrete. But in Africa you got little lizards that eat the bugs. But some of y'all, if y'all see a little lizard, y'all ain't going back in the room. Even if we kill it, and you ain't supposed to kill them, because they, you know, I learned that when we had a house, and we had these lizards, and the apartment was new. And so my wife and I upset. Little lizards walking across the wall and the ceiling. Ain't he embarrassed? We ain't paying no rent for him to become here. So then some of our African neighbors came in, and it's interesting. While we were there, we were just married. And we didn't have a family. So kids used to come knocking on the door. All these little kids. And we were wondering, well, what the hell are these? I mean, no, we didn't say that, but it was very interesting. Now, these kids come, but after a while, you say, well, what the hell are all these kids coming to our house all the time? And then after, you don't lock the door, so they can just knock and come on in. But the kids saw me cleaning the floors, taking out the garbage, you know, which the men do in helping the chores. But in Africa, that's what children do to help out. And since we didn't have any children, the families in the neighborhood sent their children to take care of us. But here we are, we're Negroes, trying to be Africans. We didn't understand the cultural dynamic. The same thing, we were looking at our outside balcony. We had a nice balcony overlooking the auto route, and all the big parades and activities were taking place there. We got, you know, we'd have our cameras going, and we, you know, getting all this recorded. You know, and we were very African conscious, my wife and I. You ain't gonna get no 2 more people African. But we didn't have sense enough to look out the back balcony. The back balcony overlooked an African courtyard. And that's where the real African life was taking place. That's where, if there was going to be a decision on marriage, they were meeting on that. Decision on something important, we should have been filming out the back. But we had, you know, we were looking for the glamour up in the front. And missed the real African life out the back. Same thing with this little, whatever you call it. The Africans came in and said, oh, you're lucky. We said, what? Lucky? They said, you got these creatures running. I said, well, you know, luck, that's a misfortune. He said, no, they will eat the bugs. And sure enough, with this knowledge, I started observing. And I'd be sitting on we had these nice